The thing about working night shifts at McDonald's is that you become invisible. People look through you, not at you. They see the uniform, not the person. For 3 years, I was grateful for that invisibility. Now I'd give anything to truly disappear as tens of thousands of strangers count down the hours until they watch me die. It all began with a customer who kept coming in during my 3 a.m. shifts at the Tottenham Court Road branch. Always ordered the same thing, a black coffee and small fries. Always sat in the corner with his laptop. Always left exactly 1 hour later. Most night workers follow patterns, so I didn't think much of it until the night he forgot his USB drive on the table. I should have turned it in to lost property. Should have left it at the register for him to collect next time. But curiosity has always been my downfall. 6 months ago, I was just a McDonald's worker pulling night shifts in central London. Nothing special about me. Just another face on the night tube. Another overpriced flat shared with 3 others in Hackney. Another Sunday morning sleeping until 2 p.m. The kind of forgettable existence that feels safe precisely because no one's paying attention. I've always been interested in computers, not in any professional way, but as an escape from the monotony of fast food work. I'd spend my days off exploring the internet, learning basic coding, playing with old laptops I'd fix up from charity shops. I ran a small Instagram account reviewing budget tech for working class people. A few hundred followers, nothing special. That night, after my shift ended, I took the USB drive home. It looked ordinary, black plastic, no brand name. I told myself I was just checking for contact information so I could return it. The drive contained several folders with mundane labels like work projects and personal. But there was one oddly named folder, just a string of numbers and letters. Inside was a single video file. When I played it, the screen remained black for several seconds before showing what appeared to be a dimly lit room. Concrete walls, a drain in the floor, a metal table with restraints. The video showed no people, just the empty room from a fixed camera angle. In the corner of the frame was a counter displaying a 4-digit number. As I watched, it increased by 1. The video ended after exactly 3 minutes. I should have deleted it immediately, should have thrown the drive away. Instead, I kept watching it, trying to understand what I was seeing. There was something unsettling about that empty room, about the steadily increasing counter. I couldn't explain why, but it filled me with a sense of dread that lingered long after I'd shut down my computer. A week passed. The regular customer didn't return to McDonald's, and I nearly forgot about the USB drive and its strange contents. Then one night, as I was walking home after my shift, I noticed someone following me. A man in a dark coat, keeping a consistent distance behind me. When I turned corners, he turned too. When I quickened my pace, he matched it. I ducked into a 24-hour Tesco to lose him, waiting among the cereal aisles for 20 minutes before continuing home by a different route. When I arrived at my flat, I found my door unlocked. My roommates were all away that weekend, so I knew it should have been secure. Inside, nothing appeared to be missing or disturbed, but my laptop was open on my bed. I always shut it down before leaving. On the screen was a website with a black background, a counter showing thousands of viewers, and the button labeled Verify. Below it was text stating my full name and address, along with the words Identity Confirmed. I barely slept that night, kept the lights on, kept checking the door. In the morning, I went to work as usual, trying to convince myself that this was some elaborate prank. Perhaps a hacker from my YouTube audience showing off. Perhaps a case of mistaken identity. When I returned home that evening, I found my front door unlocked. The new locks had been changed again. Inside, nothing appeared to be missing or disturbed, but my laptop was open on my desk. I always shut it down before leaving. On the screen was the same website from the night before, but now the counter showed 12,307, and beneath it, my full name and address were displayed, along with the words "identity confirmed." I packed a bag and left immediately. Went to a hotel in a different part of London, paid cash, used a false name, called in sick to work the next day, spent hours researching what might be happening to me. That's when I first learned about red rooms, supposedly live-stream torture or murder on the dark web, where viewers could pay to watch or even influence what happened to the victims. Most articles insisted they were urban legends. Technical experts claimed the dark web wasn't capable of supporting the bandwidth needed for live video streaming to large audiences. Law enforcement officials stated there had never been a verified case of a genuine red room. But what if they were wrong? What if someone had found a way to make it work? I stayed in the hotel for 3 days. On the fourth morning, I woke to find a note on the bedside table that hadn't been there when I went to sleep. It contained another web address and the message, "Observer status approved. Event scheduled." There was also a date and time, exactly 2 weeks from that day. I checked out immediately and went to the police. Tried to explain what was happening. Showed them the USB drive with the footage of me sleeping. They took a report, expressed concern about the break-ins, but became noticeably skeptical when I mentioned the dark web and the possibility of red rooms. They promised to investigate the unlawful entries to my flat, but suggested the rest might be an elaborate scam or harassment campaign, rather than a genuine threat to my life. I couldn't go back to my flat, couldn't go to work, couldn't contact friends or family for fear of putting them at risk. I withdrew as much cash as possible from my accounts and traveled to Manchester, where I checked into another hotel under another false name. That evening, I received a text message on my mobile, which I had kept switched off except to check for messages from the police. Location update received. Manchester Observer Hub notified. I destroyed the phone immediately and bought a new pay-as-you-go model the next day. For the next week, I moved constantly. Different cities, different hotels, sometimes sleeping on overnight trains just to stay mobile. I grew a beard, wore hats and sunglasses, paid for everything in cash, never stayed anywhere more than one night. Despite these precautions, they kept finding me. Notes would appear in my hotel rooms, messages written on bathroom mirrors in condensation. Once, I returned to a room to find my laptop, which I had left packed in my bag, open on the desk with a browser showing the mysterious website. The counter had grown to tens of thousands, and now there was a countdown timer showing days, hours, and minutes until the event. I began to notice other disturbing patterns. People photographing me in public places, the same car appearing multiple times in different cities, hotel staff who seemed to recognize me despite my using different names. It felt as if an invisible network was tracking my every move, always one step ahead. After 10 days of running, I found myself in Edinburgh, exhausted and nearly out of money. I checked into a small B&B on the outskirts of the city, planning to rest for a few hours before moving again. When I entered the room, I found a laptop waiting for me on the bed. Not mine, a new one. When I opened it, the screen showed a 3D floor plan of what appeared to be an industrial building. One room was highlighted in red, containing what looked like a metal table with restraints. The blueprint was labeled Edinburgh Facility. Below the image was the current counter, now numbering in the many tens of thousands, and the countdown timer, showing less than 3 days remaining. There was also a new message. Transport will be provided. Non-compliance will result in collateral targeting of known associates. Beneath this was a list of names. My parents, my sister, my closest friends. That's when I realized the true scope of what I was facing. This wasn't one person stalking me. This wasn't even a small group. This was an organized network with resources, reach, and apparently unlimited access to information about me and everyone I cared about. I considered ending my own life to deny them their event, but the threat against my family stopped me. Without knowing the extent of this network, I couldn't be sure they wouldn't follow through regardless. Instead, I formulated a plan. I would go to the police again, this time with the new laptop as evidence. I would insist on protective custody, not just for me, but for my family. I would tell them everything, including my growing suspicion about what the verification process really meant. I believe I wasn't randomly targeted. The original email, the white paper, it was all a test. They were looking for someone with specific knowledge of network security, but not high profile enough to be immediately missed. The verification was confirming I met their criteria. I made it within 2 blocks of the police station before I noticed the surveillance. 3 different people monitoring the approach, all speaking into earpieces. A car idling directly in front. 2 men watching the entrance. They had anticipated this move. I diverted to a public library instead, found a computer. That's where I'm writing this, from a public library computer. A warning, a record, evidence of what's happening, in case anyone ever investigates my disappearance. The counter on the website now shows tens of thousands of viewers. The countdown is at less than a day and counting. I have to assume they're monitoring public networks, so I won't be able to stay here long. Here's what I've pieced together. The dark web isn't just hosting these red rooms, it's being used to coordinate an entire infrastructure around them. Spotters, monitors, facilities in different cities, a subscription base that apparently numbers in the tens of thousands. Most disturbing is the verification process itself. I think the reason these red rooms have never been conclusively proven to exist is that they're constantly changing, moving between locations, using different methods, different personnel. No one person knows the entire operation except those at the very top. The participants, the viewers, are verified gradually through a series of interactions that assess their trustworthiness and commitment. Each is given small tasks related to monitoring or facilitating. Each becomes complicit in the system before they ever see a full event. By the time they witness what really happens, they're already implicated, already part of it, already unable to go to authorities without incriminating themselves. It's the perfect self-sustaining system of horror. Everyone involved has incentive to maintain secrecy. Everyone shares in the culpability. Everyone is both observer and participant. I wonder how many others have written warnings like this one. How many have tried to expose what's happening only to disappear before anyone took them seriously? How many have ended up on those metal tables in nondescript industrial buildings, their final hours broadcast to thousands of paying viewers? The librarian is giving me odd looks. I've been here too long. Someone just entered wearing an earpiece. I need to move again. If you're reading this and you receive an email asking for your professional opinion on something related to your field, be careful. If you receive strange messages about verification processes, be afraid. If you find evidence that someone has been in your home while you slept, run and keep running. The counter never stops growing. Right now, tens of thousands of people are waiting to watch what happens to me tomorrow night. How many will be watching when they come for you? I'm leaving the library now. I still have less than a day to find a way out of this, to protect my family, to somehow disappear more effectively than I have so far. I don't have much hope, but I have to try. Remember my warning. The red rooms are real, the network is vast, and the verification process may already have begun for you without your knowledge. One click is all it takes. I never meant to find it. That's important to understand. I was just a bored software developer working from my flat in Manchester, running tests on a new algorithm designed to filter illegal content from social media platforms. It was a contract job for a mid-sized tech company. Good money, flexible hours, and the sort of work that looks impressive on a CV. The kind of opportunity you don't question too deeply. My algorithm was supposed to identify and flag videos containing violence, abuse, or other prohibited content before they could be uploaded. Nothing revolutionary, just an improvement on existing systems. I needed sample data to test it, so the company gave me access to a secure server containing thousands of videos that had been previously removed from their platform. Most were exactly what you'd expect: fights, animal cruelty, dangerous stunts gone wrong. The algorithm handled these easily, assigning risk scores with over 95% accuracy compared to human moderators. But there were outliers. Videos that humans had flagged, but my system missed entirely. These were the ones I needed to focus on to improve the detection rates. One particular video kept slipping through. The file name was just a string of numbers and letters, and according to the metadata, 6 different human moderators had flagged it for immediate removal, each citing different reasons. When I finally reviewed it myself, I was confused. It showed an empty room with white walls, a concrete floor, and a single metal chair in the center. Nothing happened for nearly 3 minutes. No people, no movement, just static footage of an empty room. The video quality was poor, with occasional digital artifacts, compression issues most likely. I ran it through the algorithm again with different parameters, but it consistently received a low-risk score. I noted this as an anomaly and moved on to other samples. But that night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about it. Why had 6 moderators independently flagged an empty room? What were they seeing that both I and my algorithm had missed? The next morning, I downloaded the video file and examined it more carefully. The metadata contained an unusual string in the creator field, what looked like an onion address, the kind used on Tor networks. Out of professional curiosity, I accessed Tor through a secure virtual machine and entered the address. It led to a black screen with a simple login form and a counter displaying 4,291. As I watched, the number increased to 4,292. The site offered no explanation of what this counter represented. No context, no identifying information. Just a login form and that steadily increasing number. I closed the browser and returned to my work. I had deadlines to meet, and mysterious websites weren't relevant to improving my algorithm. I modified the code to better detect empty rooms with strange metadata and moved on to other test cases. 3 days later, I received an email from an address consisting of random characters. The subject line was the same string of numbers and letters as the video file name. The body contained only a username and password, followed by the words, "Observer access granted." I should have deleted it immediately, should have reported it to the company's security team. Instead, I saved the information and continued working as if nothing had happened. That night, after a few glasses of wine, I reopened my secure virtual machine, accessed the .onion address, and entered the credentials. The site loaded to show the same empty room from the video, but now as a live feed. The counter in the corner showed 7,843. A chat window occupied the right side of the screen, messages scrolling by too quickly to read properly. From what I could gather, users were discussing preparations for something called an event. Some were placing what appeared to be bets using cryptocurrency. In the bottom left corner was a countdown timer. 47 hours, 12 minutes, and 36 seconds. Just under 3 days. I watched for about 20 minutes. Nothing changed in the room. The chat continued with discussions I couldn't fully follow, filled with abbreviations and terminology I didn't recognize. I logged out, shut down the virtual machine, and tried to forget about it. The next day, I received another email from a different random address. This one contained only a postcode, my postcode, and the message, confirmation required for observer status. I immediately strengthened all my security settings, changed passwords, and ran multiple malware scans. Everything came back clean. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence or a scare tactic used by whatever strange corner of the internet I'd stumbled into. Still, I deleted the virtual machine and resolved to focus solely on my work. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I checked through the peephole, no one was there. But on the ground was a small package wrapped in brown paper with no postage or shipping labels. Inside was a cheap mobile phone, switched off, with a handwritten note containing just a time, 2000 hours. Against my better judgment, I turned on the phone at the specified time. It immediately connected to a network I didn't recognize and opened to a video feed. The same room, the same angle, but now the chair was occupied. A person sat there, head covered by a black hood, hands secured behind their back. The counter now showed 12,574 and was increasing rapidly. The chat window was moving so fast it was just a blur of text. The countdown timer read 0031 minutes 8 seconds, 31 minutes. I wanted to turn it off, to throw the phone away, but I couldn't look away. I told myself I needed to know what this was, what I had inadvertently become involved with. At exactly 20:30, a figure entered the frame wearing a featureless white mask and surgical gloves. They carried a small tray of implements I couldn't clearly identify. The masked figure approached the bound person and held up what looked like a scalpel to the camera. The chat suddenly slowed, and a message appeared in red. Bidding begins. Choose location. I switched off the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I understood now what I had found, what the algorithm had failed to detect, what those 6 human moderators had recognized from experience. The empty room wasn't just an empty room. It was a stage being set. I spent the night researching red rooms, supposedly live-stream torture or murder that viewers could pay to watch or even direct. Most credible sources insisted they were urban myths, technically impossible to stream securely. But what if the conventional wisdom was wrong? What if someone had found a way to make it work? I needed to report this to the authorities, but I had a problem. I had accessed the site. I had watched. My digital fingerprints were all over this, and I had no way to prove I had stumbled onto it innocently. I decided to gather more evidence before coming forward. The next day, I returned to work and began examining other videos that had slipped past my algorithm, but been flagged by human moderators. There were 5 more showing empty rooms, each with different layouts, but similar empty chairs. Each file contained hidden .onion addresses in the metadata. That evening, another package arrived at my door. This one contained a USB drive. When I checked it on a secure system, it contained a single video file. It showed the complete event from the previous night. I couldn't watch more than a few seconds before shutting it down. But in those seconds, I saw enough to know this was real. These weren't actors. This wasn't simulated. And according to the counter, over 15,000 people had watched it happen. I decided to go to the police the next morning. I would turn over everything I had found and face whatever consequences came with it. I spent the night copying evidence to an external drive and writing a detailed account of how I had discovered the site. I woke to the sound of an email notification. The subject line was "Observer Status Revoked." The body contained my full name, address, and a photograph of me sleeping in my bed, taken from inside my flat, hours earlier. Below the photo was a message: "Participant status pending. Current bids, 18 inches. I left immediately with just my wallet and phone, checked into a hotel on the other side of the city using cash, spent the day moving between public places, trying to figure out what to do. That evening, I returned to the hotel to find the door to my room slightly ajar. Inside, everything appeared untouched except for the television, which was turned onto a blank screen with a counter, 23,109. I packed up again and left, taking a night bus to Leeds, found another hotel, tried to sleep, woke to find my new room's mirror had fogged up despite no one using the shower. Written in the condensation was a set of coordinates and a time, 2 days from now. I looked up the coordinates. They pointed to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Birmingham. I've been moving constantly since then, different cities, different hotels, always paying cash. I've disposed of my original phone, bought and discarded several burners. Each time I think I've broken the pattern, I find evidence they found me. A note slipped under a door, a message written on a receipt, a counter displayed on a digital screen as I walk past. The most terrifying part is not knowing how they keep finding me, or who they even are. Is it one person, a group? Is it the thousands of observers, some percentage of whom are actively tracking me? I've examined my clothing for tracking devices, checked for implants under my skin, scanned for rogue wireless signals. Nothing. 3 hours ago, I received a text on my newest phone, one that no one should have the number for. Final preparations underway. Broadcast begins 2100. Viewer count 41,863. I'm writing this in a library in Glasgow using a public computer. I've been on trains, buses and taxis continuously for the past 48 hours. I haven't slept, barely eaten. I'm running out of cash, options and places to hide. I've come to a terrible realization. What I discovered wasn't just a red room. It was an entire ecosystem built around them. My algorithm wasn't failing to detect prohibited content. It was being trained to deliberately ignore it. The company that hired me wasn't trying to remove this content. They were developing sophisticated methods to hide it in plain sight. The contract job, the test videos, the access to the secure server, it was all a setup. They weren't assessing the algorithm's ability to detect prohibited content. They were assessing me, my reaction, my moral flexibility, my potential as either an asset to their operation or a threat to be eliminated. And I failed their test by showing too much curiosity, by looking too closely at what I was meant to overlook. The most disturbing part is how vast this network must be. The resources required to track someone across multiple cities, to always be one step ahead, to have eyes everywhere. It suggests organization and reach that goes beyond what any ordinary criminal enterprise should be capable of. I wonder how many other programmers, content moderators, and data analysts have been pulled into this system. How many recognized what I failed to see and chose to look the other way? How many became observers rather than raising alarms? How many are watching now? I have less than 6 hours until the scheduled broadcast. The counter likely shows over 50,000 by now. 50,000 people waiting to watch what happens to me. I've considered turning myself in to the police, but what if some of them are connected to this network? The level of coordination I've witnessed suggests infiltration of normal systems. Who can I trust? I keep thinking about those other empty rooms I found in the test videos. How many people have sat in those chairs? How many more will follow? And was I selected randomly? Or is there something specific about me that made them choose me as the next subject? I don't know if anyone will believe this account. It sounds paranoid, even to me as I write it. But I know what I've seen. I know what's hunting me. I'm going to post this and then head to the train station. I have a plan to get to a remote village in the Scottish Highlands where a former colleague has a holiday cottage. No internet, no mobile service. Maybe if I can stay off the grid long enough, they'll select another target, move on to someone else. That's the final horror of this system. The knowledge that my only hope for survival may be that someone else takes my place in that chair. That the observer's attention shifts to another victim. That the algorithm selects a new participant. The idea makes me sick, but I'm out of alternatives. If you're reading this and you work in content moderation, data filtering, or AI development, pay attention to what your systems are being trained to ignore. Look closer at the empty rooms. Ask questions about the files everyone seems to overlook. And if you ever receive an email offering observer status, delete it immediately. Don't let curiosity lead you where it led me. The broadcast is scheduled for 2100 hours tonight. I have no intention of being in front of a camera. But as I've learned over these past terrible days, my intentions may no longer matter. I want to tell you about the day I stopped watching those short videos. You know the ones, where you just mindlessly swipe up again and again until you realize 3 hours have passed. That algorithm had me figured out perfectly until it showed me something I wish I could unsee. The moment still replays in my head, an ordinary-looking prank video that suddenly turned into something unmistakably real, something that changed me forever. I'm sharing this now because I've kept it bottled up for too long. My friends noticed how I changed afterwards, deleting all my social media, jumping whenever my phone made a notification sound. The counselor at uni thinks I'm dealing with some kind of digital anxiety disorder, but how can I tell her what really happened? She'd either think I was making it up or report it to the police, and honestly, I'm too scared to find out what would happen next. Writing it down like this, anonymously, feels safer, like I'm finally letting it out without putting myself at risk. So here goes. Last autumn, I was in my second year at university in Leeds, studying media and communications. The irony isn't lost on me now. I was living in a shared house with 4 other students, but I was always the night owl of the group. I'd stay up scrolling through videos when everyone else had gone to bed. The endless stream of content was my way of switching off after a day of lectures and coursework. I'd gotten into this habit of watching these short videos for hours before bed. You know how it goes. 1 minute, you're watching someone make a fancy coffee drink. The next, you're deep into videos of people exploring abandoned buildings or pulling elaborate pranks. The algorithm keeps feeding you more of what you engage with, and before you know it, you're in some weird corner of the internet. That night, it was a Tuesday in November. I remember, because I had a presentation the next day that I was putting off preparing for. I'd been scrolling for about an hour. It was around 1 a.m., and I was lying in bed with all the lights off, except for the blue glow of my phone. The videos had taken a slightly darker turn, as they often did late at night. I'd gone from watching cooking videos to urban exploration to pranks that seemed a bit cruel but still within the realm of normal internet content. Then I swiped up to a video that started like many others. The thumbnail showed a young man, maybe in his early 20s, sleeping on a sofa. The caption said something about the ultimate wake-up prank on his friend. Nothing unusual there. I'd seen hundreds of these. People being woken up with air horns, water buckets, fake spiders. Internet culture thrives on that momentary fear, followed by relief and laughter. The video started with someone filming themselves walking slowly towards the sleeping person. There was no music, just the sound of quiet breathing and footsteps. The camera quality was slightly grainy, lower than the usual crisp videos that get promoted on the platform. That should have been my first clue that this wasn't from the usual content creators. As the camera got closer to the sleeping figure, I noticed something odd. The sleeping person seemed to be restrained somehow. Their wrists were at an unnatural angle beside them. I thought maybe it was just the way they were lying, but something felt off. The camera panned up to show the person's face, which had what looked like duct tape across the mouth. For a split second, I still thought it was an elaborate prank, maybe a staged kidnapping scenario between friends trying to create shocking content for views. Then the camera pulled back, and I could see the entire scene. The sleeping person wasn't on a sofa, but appeared to be on some kind of plastic sheeting on the floor. Their hands and feet were bound with what looked like zip ties, cutting into the skin. Around them was a carefully arranged set of tools, knives, pliers, what looked like a blowtorch. This wasn't a prank video. This was something much worse. The video lasted only about 30 seconds total. The last few seconds showed the person behind the camera reaching down and selecting a knife, then the bound person's eyes flying open in terror as they realized what was happening. Then the video ended abruptly. I stared at my screen in shock. For a moment, I wasn't sure what I'd just seen. There's a part of your brain that tries to normalize even the most disturbing things. I told myself it was just a really dark prank, or maybe a clip from a horror film, or an elaborate setup for a viral marketing campaign. I even swiped back up to see it again, to reassure myself it wasn't what I thought it was. But the video was gone. In its place was a cooking tutorial. I scrolled back down, looking for the video, but it had vanished completely. I closed the app and reopened it, but my feed was back to showing the usual content. Nothing remotely resembling what I'd just witnessed. I put my phone down and sat up in bed, my heart racing. Had I imagined it? Was I so tired that my mind had twisted an innocent prank video into something sinister? I almost convinced myself that was the case, that I needed to get more sleep and stop scrolling through videos until the early hours. But then my phone vibrated with a notification. I picked it up, half expecting to see a message from one of my housemates asking me to quiet down. Sometimes I didn't realize how loud I was being when everyone else was trying to sleep. Instead, it was a notification from an app I'd never seen before. The icon was just a simple black dot. The notification just said, "Enjoyed the preview. Swipe for more." I immediately deleted the notification and checked my installed apps. There was nothing there that matched the black dot icon. I ran a virus scan, which came back clean. I restarted my phone, changed my passwords, all the things you're supposed to do when something seems off with your device. By the time I finished, it was nearly 3 a.m., and I managed to convince myself that it was just a glitch, maybe an ad for a horror film that had somehow made it through the platform's content filters. The next day, I was exhausted during my presentation, but managed to get through it. I didn't tell anyone about what I'd seen. What would I say? That I might have stumbled upon something disturbing but wasn't completely sure. That I got a strange notification afterwards that I couldn't explain. It sounded paranoid, even to me. For a few days, everything went back to normal. I still used my phone but avoided the video app. I focused on coursework and spent more time with my housemates in the evenings instead of isolating myself with endless scrolling. I almost forgot about the incident. Then, about a week later, I received an email from an address that was just a string of numbers and letters. The subject line was blank, and the body of the email contained only a link. Against my better judgment, and I still don't know why I did this, I clicked it. The link took me to what looked like a clone of the popular video app, but something was off. The interface was slightly different, with a dark grey background instead of white, and instead of the usual categories and trending topics, there was just a continuous feed of videos that started playing automatically. These weren't normal videos. Each one showed someone in distress, bound, crying, pleading silently with the camera. Some were being pranked in ways that went far beyond anything that could be considered a joke. Being burned with cigarettes, cut with knives, terrorized with weapons. And between each distressing video were clips of normal, everyday content. The exact kind of videos I usually watched, from creators I recognized. I tried to exit the page, but it wouldn't close. I tried closing the browser, but it reopened itself. In a panic, I forced my phone to shut down by holding the power button. When I turned it back on, everything seemed normal again. The browser history showed no record of the site I'd visited. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I'd seen and what it meant. Had I somehow stumbled into some dark web version of the popular video platform? Was there a shadow version of the app that showed content too disturbing for the mainstream? And more terrifyingly, how had it found me? The next morning, I woke up to another notification from the Black Dot app that wasn't installed on my phone. This time it said, "Your viewing habits have been analyzed. Recommendations ready." That was when I knew this wasn't random. Whatever this was, it had been watching what I watched, learning my preferences, my viewing patterns, just like the main algorithm, but for something much darker. And somehow, it had decided I was ready for more extreme content. I didn't open the notification. Instead, I did a factory reset on my phone, wiping everything. I changed all my passwords from my laptop, set up two-factor authentication on every account. I even changed my email address and phone number. Paranoid? Absolutely. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been marked somehow. For a while, it seemed to work. No more strange notifications, no more disturbing videos. I still used social media, but was much more careful about what I engaged with. I set time limits for apps and never used them late at night when my guard might be down. Then came the package. It arrived at my house about a month later, addressed to me but with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a printed card that said, "Custom content based on your viewing history." I didn't plug in the USB drive. I'm not that stupid. But I didn't throw it away either. Something stopped me. Some morbid curiosity, or perhaps the feeling that discarding it wouldn't make this go away. Instead, I wrapped it in plastic and buried it in a shoebox in my wardrobe. Sometimes, late at night, I think about what might be on it. Videos tailored specifically to what the algorithm thought would appeal to me, based on everything I'd ever watched, every video I'd lingered on a second too long, every dark curiosity I'd indulged thinking no one was watching. It's been 6 months now. I've changed universities, moved to a different city. I use technology as little as possible, just enough for my studies and to stay in touch with family. No more social media, no more endless scrolling. But I can't escape the feeling that I'm still being watched, that the algorithm is still learning, still waiting to show me more. Every CCTV camera, every smartphone, every laptop camera feels like an eye following me. And the worst part is knowing that whatever I saw that night, whatever dark corner of the internet I glimpsed, it's still out there, People are still scrolling through it, still being fed content that gets progressively darker, still being desensitized bit by bit, until suddenly they're watching something real and horrific without even realizing the line they've crossed. Sometimes I wonder how many other people got the same recommendations I did. How many clicked through? How many watched more than I did? How many are still watching? And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if I'm in one of those videos now too. If someone, somewhere, is swiping through short videos and will come across footage of me going about my day, oblivious to the camera following me. And they'll pause for a moment, thinking it's a bit odd, a bit different from the usual content, before swiping up to the next video. Never realizing what they've just seen or what might be coming next. Just another swipe in an endless stream of content, getting darker with every flick of the thumb. I barely slept in the past 2 weeks. Every little sound makes me jump now. The refrigerator humming, a car door closing outside, the heating system clicking on. I keep thinking I hear things that aren't there. Voices hidden in everyday noises. The more I keep this bottled up, the more I feel like I'm going to lose my mind completely, so here goes. I work as an audio engineer at a small recording studio in Bristol. Nothing fancy or high profile, mostly local bands and podcast production. But I've always had a good ear for sound. That's what makes this whole thing so much worse. I should have noticed it sooner. I should have recognized what I was hearing the first time. About 3 weeks ago, my friend Alex sent me a message asking if I could give some feedback on a music track he was working on. We've known each other since university, where we both studied sound engineering, but while I went into studio work, he took a more experimental route with electronic music. He's always sending me works in progress, asking for my opinion on mixing or mastering, and I'm usually happy to help. It's a good arrangement. I keep my critical listening skills sharp, and he gets free professional feedback. The track he sent me that night was different from his usual style. He described it as ambient experimental, with some field recordings mixed in. He said he'd been playing around with layering environmental sounds to create atmosphere beneath the music. That didn't seem unusual to me. Field recordings are common in certain genres, and Alex was always trying new techniques. I remember it was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. I just finished a late session at the studio and was unwinding at my desk at home with a glass of whiskey, still wearing the clothes I'd worked in all day. My flat was quiet, except for the occasional car passing on the wet street outside. It had been raining all day, one of those endless grey February days that make you feel like summer might never come again. I put on my studio headphones, the expensive ones I use for detailed listening, and downloaded Alex's track. It was about 8 minutes long, which seemed a bit excessive for a demo, but that was typical of Alex. He's never been one for radio-friendly 3-minute songs. The track started with a low drone, gradually building with subtle electronic elements. Nothing unusual there. Around the 2-minute mark, the field recordings began to blend in. What sounded like distant traffic, wind through trees, maybe the ambient noise of a public space. It was actually quite effective, creating this sense of physical space within the music. But around 4 minutes in, something caught my attention. Behind the main elements, almost completely buried in the mix, I could hear what sounded like voices. This isn't uncommon in field recordings. You often pick up snippets of conversation when recording in public places, but something about these voices made me uneasy. They sounded tense, maybe frightened. I adjusted the equalization on my computer, boosting the mid-range frequencies where human voices typically sit, and played that section again. With the adjustment, I could make out more clearly what sounded like a person, possibly a woman, speaking urgently. The words weren't clear, but the tone definitely conveyed distress. I paused the track, feeling suddenly uncomfortable. I told myself it was just an interesting sample Alex had found online or recorded from a film. Field recordings often have strange, ambiguous sounds that your brain tries to interpret as something recognizable. Audio engineers call it pareidolia, like seeing faces in clouds, but with sound. Your brain tries to find patterns, meaning where there might be none. I continued listening, but now I was focused entirely on the background elements. As the track progressed, the voices became slightly more prominent. Around the 6-minute mark, buried under a swelling synth pad, I distinctly heard what sounded like someone screaming. It was distant, heavily processed with reverb, but unmistakable once I'd noticed it. And it didn't sound like it was from a film or staged. It had a raw, desperate quality that made my skin crawl. I stopped the track again and took off my headphones, suddenly aware of how fast my heart was beating. The silence of my flat felt oppressive now. I took a large sip of whiskey, trying to calm myself down. I was being ridiculous. Alex was just experimenting with unsettling samples to create atmosphere. That's all it was. I put my headphones back on, determined to finish listening professionally. The final 2 minutes of the track became increasingly chaotic, with the background voices and sounds growing more prominent beneath the music. What I'd initially perceived as artistic ambient noise now sounded like a deliberate attempt to mask something disturbing. The screams, though still distant, seemed to multiply. And underneath it all, there was a rhythmic sound I couldn't quite identify. Mechanical, repetitive. When the track finally ended, I sat in silence for several minutes. A rational part of my brain was saying that Alex had simply created a disturbing piece of experimental music. Maybe he'd sampled horror movies or found some creepy sounds online. But another part of me, the part that had spent years training to distinguish subtle details in audio, was deeply unsettled. I played the track again, this time opening it in my professional audio software where I could visualize the sound waves and separate the frequencies. With the proper tools, I began isolating different layers of the recording. The main musical elements were clearly composed and synthetic, as expected, but the background field recordings appeared to be a single continuous audio file that had been processed to sound distant. When I isolated this layer and enhanced it, what I heard made me physically recoil from my desk. It was unmistakably people in extreme distress. Multiple voices begging, screaming, crying. The mechanical sound I'd noticed was clearer now too. Something repetitive and metallic, like a crank or lever being operated. And beneath it all, almost imperceptible even with enhancement, was a voice speaking calmly, methodically, giving instructions. I felt physically sick. This couldn't be some creative sample Alex had found. It was too raw, too consistent. It sounded like genuine audio of people being tortured. With shaking hands, I sent Alex a message, asking about the source of the field recordings. His response came quickly. Just some stuff I found in an interesting corner of the web. Thought it added a unique atmosphere. Too intense. That vague answer only increased my unease. I pressed him, asking directly if he knew what the voices in the background were. He replied that he hadn't noticed any distinct voices, just atmospheric noise. Either he was lying, or he genuinely hadn't heard what was clearly audible to my trained ear once I knew to look for it. Neither option was comforting. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what I'd heard and what it might mean. The next morning, I decided to extract the background audio layer completely and run it through additional filters to clean it up further. What emerged was far worse than I'd initially thought. The clearer audio revealed what sounded like a methodical session where someone was calmly directing the torture of multiple people. The most disturbing part was that the voice occasionally referenced viewers or an audience, as if this was being streamed or recorded specifically for others to watch. I'd heard of red rooms on the dark web, supposedly live streams of torture or worse that people paid to watch. Most experts said they were urban legends, technically impossible to stream reliably through Tor networks. But what if they were real? What if instead of streaming video, which requires significant bandwidth, they distributed high-quality audio recordings afterward? I felt caught in an impossible situation. If what I'd heard was real, it was evidence of horrific crimes. But going to the police would mean explaining how I came to possess it, potentially implicating myself and definitely implicating Alex. And would they even take it seriously? It would sound insane. Claims of hidden torture audio in an experimental music track. I decided to dig deeper first. I checked the audio file's metadata, looking for any clues about its origin. The original field recording had been created 3 months earlier, according to the timestamp. But more disturbing was a hidden comment in the metadata, a string of random characters followed by .onion, unmistakably a dark web address. That night, Alex sent me another message asking what I thought of the track. I gave him some vague technical feedback, afraid to reveal what I'd discovered. He seemed pleased and mentioned he had more experimental audio he'd like my opinion on, if I was interested. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. What if Alex was involved in something terrible? What if he was testing me somehow, seeing if I would notice the hidden sounds? Or worse, what if he wasn't the one who put them there at all? What if someone had compromised his computer or accounts? A week after receiving the track, I received an anonymous email. The subject line was simply those same random characters I'd found in the metadata. The body contained only 2 sentences. "We noticed you've been listening very carefully. Would you like to hear more?" I immediately deleted the email and shut down my computer. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled my drink across my desk. Someone knew I'd isolated that audio. Someone was watching. I haven't responded to any of Alex's messages since then. I bought a new laptop and phone. I stay at different friends' houses, never in my own flat for more than a few hours to collect essentials. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if I'm being followed. The worst part is the uncertainty. Was what I heard actually real? Or was it an elaborate hoax? Is Alex involved? Or is he being used somehow? And who sent that email? I don't know if I'll ever have answers, and I'm too afraid to keep looking. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I can hear those screams again, hidden beneath the normal sounds of the world around me. And I wonder how many other recordings like that are out there, with horrors hidden in their background noise, waiting for someone with the right ear to discover them. I was just another burned-out journalism student at the University of Manchester, drowning in student debt and desperate for a dissertation that might actually matter. Now I'm writing this from a service station somewhere in Wales, looking over my shoulder every 30 seconds, convinced that thousands of invisible eyes are tracking my every move. And the worst part? I brought this all on myself with nothing more than curiosity and an investigation into internet urban legends that turned out to be horrifyingly real. I work at a small online news outlet in Leeds. Nothing special, just writing clickbait articles and repackaging trending stories when I'm not working on my dissertation about the dark corners of internet culture. The job barely paid the rent for my dingy flat in Headingley, which is probably why I developed an obsession with investigating internet urban legends for my dissertation. I wanted a breakthrough story, something that would get me noticed. My girlfriend used to warn me about going too deep into those rabbit holes before she moved to Edinburgh for her dream job. Now it's just me, my research notes, and too much time on my hands. The first time I accessed the dark web, it was underwhelming. Most of the sites were just marketplaces for drugs or counterfeit goods, nothing you wouldn't expect. Forums discussing privacy rights, whistleblower platforms. I was specifically researching the myth of red rooms for my thesis, supposedly live-stream torture or murder that viewers could pay to watch or even influence. Every expert I'd interviewed insisted they were just urban legends, no actual evidence of their existence. The ultimate internet boogeyman story. For 3 months I just observed, following forum threads and communicating with anonymous sources who claimed to have witnessed these broadcasts. Most were obviously lying, embellishing stories they'd heard elsewhere. I created a detailed map of these claims, tracking patterns and inconsistencies, looking for anything that might suggest truth behind the myths. I never participated in anything illegal. I just watched, collected testimonies, told myself it was all for academic research and journalism. That's when I found the first breadcrumb. It wasn't even from the dark web, but from a message board dedicated to investigating internet mysteries. A user with no posting history had responded to a thread debunking red rooms. The post contained nothing but a string of characters that looked like an encryption key. Others in the thread dismissed it as trolling, but something about it caught my attention. The format was unlike anything I'd seen before. Not a standard URL or a simple cipher. I should have left it alone. I know that now. But at the time, I convinced myself that following this lead was important for my thesis, for exposing the truth about internet urban legends. So I copied the string and spent about a week analyzing it, eventually determining it was a complex access token for a hidden service. When I finally used the key, it brought me to what looked like a waiting room, just a black page with a counter showing 9,412 and slowly ticking up. No other information, no links, no way to interact with it. I observed it for days, watching the number climb to just over 10,000 before the page suddenly changed. The new page contained only a message, observer status granted. Below it was a countdown timer set to 72 hours and a Bitcoin wallet address. The message explained that to maintain observer status, a contribution of 0.05 Bitcoin was required before the timer expired. Not a huge amount, about $1,800 at the time, but not insignificant either. I almost closed the window right then. This was clearly heading into territory I didn't want to be involved with, but a part of me, the part that couldn't stop wondering what was behind all these layers, kept the tab open. I didn't send any Bitcoin, obviously. I just watched the timer count down, curious about what would happen when it reached 0. Nothing happened when the timer expired. The page simply refreshed to show the same waiting room with the counter I'd seen before, now at around 11,000. I figured that was it. I'd been denied access for not paying and was bumped back to the beginning. Fine by me. I actually felt relieved and went to bed resolving to drop this whole exploration. The next morning, I woke up to an email from an address consisting of random characters. No subject line. The body contained only the same Bitcoin wallet address from the website and the words, "Final notice, 24 hours." I hadn't given my email to anyone. I hadn't logged into anything. There was no way they should have been able to connect my browsing to my personal email. I checked my system for malware, ran multiple scans, reviewed my network logs. Nothing unusual appeared. I changed all my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication everywhere it wasn't already active, and even reformatted my main computer. The email bothered me more than I wanted to admit, not because of the implied threat, but because it meant my security had been compromised somehow. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. It consisted of 5 words. "We see you, observer." I blocked the number immediately, then spent hours checking my apartment for hidden cameras or signs of intrusion. Finding nothing, I convinced myself it was just an intimidation tactic, probably automated to scare people into paying. I didn't sleep well that night, or the night after. By the 3rd day, when the 24 hours had long expired, I started to relax slightly. Nothing had happened, no more messages. I went to work, came home, ordered takeout. Normal life resumed, until I received a package. It arrived on my doorstep with no postage or shipping label, just a small brown box sealed with clear packing tape. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note with 7 words, "From one observer to another. Your choice." I didn't plug in the drive. I'm not an idiot. Instead, I used an old air-gapped laptop to safely examine its contents. The drive contained a single video file about 3 minutes long. The thumbnail showed what looked like a poorly lit room. I hesitated before playing it. Everything in me said not to look, but curiosity, that same damn curiosity that had started this whole thing, won out. The video showed a room with concrete walls, industrial lighting, a drain in the floor, and a person, I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman, sitting in a metal chair in the center. They wore a black hood over their head and their hands were bound behind them. In the corner of the frame was a timestamp from 2 days earlier and a view counter that showed 16. In the bottom right corner was a chat window with messages scrolling by, usernames obscured. As I continued watching, frozen in horror, a figure in a featureless white mask entered the frame. They carried what looked like medical instruments on a small tray. The bound person began struggling against their restraints. The masked figure set down the tray and held up what appeared to be a scalpel to the camera, as if displaying it for the viewers. The chat window erupted with activity. The masked figure approached the bound person slowly, methodically. They placed the scalpel against the person's exposed forearm, causing them to flinch. The figure looked directly at the camera, head tilted questioningly. Then the chat window changed. A single message appeared in red text. "Shallow cut, 200 USD. I stopped the video, my stomach heaving. I destroyed the laptop and the USB drive, smashed them both with a hammer, then disposed of the pieces in different dumpsters across the city. I reported the package to the police anonymously, but without more information about where it came from. I knew they couldn't do much. For weeks afterward, I lived in constant anxiety. I changed my phone number, created new email addresses, even considered moving. But nothing else happened. No more messages, no more packages. Eventually, the fear began to subside, replaced by a persistent, low-grade dread that I tried to ignore. Then, about 2 months later, I noticed something unusual on my network traffic monitor, a tool I'd been running obsessively since the incident. An unknown device was connecting to my Wi-Fi for brief periods, usually late at night. The MAC address didn't match any of my devices. I changed my network password immediately, but the device connected again the next night. I set up additional monitoring tools, trying to identify what this device was and what it was doing on my network. All I could determine was that it was accessing my network storage, specifically folders containing personal photos and documents. The next day, I came home from work to find my apartment exactly as I'd left it, except for one detail. My laptop was open. I always close it before leaving. On the screen was a photo of me, sleeping in my bed, taken the night before. In the corner of the image was that same counter I'd seen on the website months ago, now well over 20,000, and a chat window with messages I couldn't read. At the bottom of the screen, a single line of text: subject acquisition pending. Vote now. I packed a bag and left immediately, checked into a Travelodge under a false name, paid in cash. I called in sick to work for the next week. I considered going to the police, but what would I tell them? That I'd stumbled across something on the dark web, and now unknown people were watching me sleep? That they'd somehow compromised my devices despite all my security precautions? They'd either think I was paranoid or involved in something illegal myself. In the hotel, I spent hours researching how to disappear completely, how to create a new identity, how to live off the grid. I withdrew most of my savings in cash, bought a pay-as-you-go mobile, and started making plans to leave the country. The night before I planned to leave, I woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of my hotel room door opening. I'd engaged the safety latch before sleeping, so the door only opened a few inches before catching. Through the gap, I could see a figure standing in the hallway. They stood there for several long seconds, not moving, not trying to force the door further. Then they slipped a piece of paper through the gap and left. I waited, heart pounding, for nearly an hour before I worked up the courage to retrieve the paper. On it was printed a QR code and 3 words: "Your audience awaits." I didn't scan the code. Instead, I left immediately, abandoning most of my belongings in the hotel room. I drove non-stop for several hours, eventually reaching a small village in the Scottish Highlands where I knew no one. I paid 3 months' rent in advance for a cottage outside the village, using a different name. The place had no internet connection, which was exactly what I wanted. For the first month, I jumped at every sound. I kept the curtains drawn at all times and rarely ventured into the village. But as weeks passed, with no sign of being followed, I began to relax slightly. Maybe they'd lost interest. Maybe they'd moved on to easier targets. I found work at a local hardware shop, kept to myself, started building a new life. I bought a basic mobile but used it only for calls to work. No internet, no social media, no digital footprint. I convinced myself I was safe. Until last night. I was restocking shelves at the shop when a customer approached. A man I'd never seen before in a village where I recognized most faces by now. He asked for help finding Ethernet cables, of all things. As I led him to the correct aisle, he mentioned offhandedly that he was setting up a new security system. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. The word security system hung in the air between us. I tried to maintain my composure, asking what kind of system he was installing. He examined a package of cables, turning it over in his hands. His eyes never left the packaging as he spoke about being fascinated by observation, seeing without being seen, how some people never realize how visible they really are. I mumbled something about checking the stockroom and retreated to the back room, heart racing. It could have been an innocent conversation. It probably was. But the word choice, observation, hit too close to home. When I returned, the man was gone. In his place, on the shelf where the router cables were displayed, was a small piece of paper. On it was written a number, 57,249. Below the number was a date, 3 days from now, and the word scheduled. The counter, their audience had grown. I'm writing this now from a library computer 2 counties away. I left Scotland immediately after my shift ended yesterday. I haven't been back to the cottage. I left everything behind again. I know what you're thinking, that I'm being paranoid, seeing connections where there are none. Maybe you're right. Maybe that man was just a customer making conversation, and the paper with the number was unrelated. Maybe the entire thing, the website, the USB drive, the hotel visitor, has a rational explanation that doesn't involve what I fear it does. But I've seen the reality of what I once thought was just an urban legend. I've seen a person bound to a chair while anonymous viewers bid on what would happen to them next. I've seen how the torturer looked at the camera, waiting for instructions. I've seen my own face displayed with a scheduled date. I can feel eyes on me constantly now. I notice security cameras tracking my movements. I see people looking at their phones when I walk by, as if they're checking something, confirming something. I don't know if they're still watching because I found something I shouldn't have, or if I've become the next scheduled broadcast, the victim rather than the observer. But I know I can't keep running forever. Resources are limited. Vigilance fades. Mistakes happen. Sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I see that counter ticking upward. I wonder how many are watching at any given moment. I wonder what they're waiting to see. I wonder what amounts they'll bid to decide my fate. I never sent that Bitcoin payment, never officially subscribed to whatever service I'd stumbled across. But I'm starting to think that doesn't matter. That maybe the payment was never the point. Maybe the real currency is attention, views, engagement. The thrill of watching someone who doesn't know they're being watched until they do. I'm going to post this as a warning. Don't go looking for red rooms. Don't convince yourself it's just research or morbid curiosity. Some things once seen can't be unseen. And some things, once they see you, never look away. If you're reading this and you recognize the patterns I've described, the counters, the observer status, any of it, then you're already on their radar. And I'm sorry, I truly am, because I don't know how to make them stop watching. I'm leaving this library now. I won't say where I'm going next. I probably shouldn't have written this at all, but someone needs to know what's out there, what's happening. If you ever receive a package with no return address, or find your devices behaving strangely, or notice someone watching you just a little too intently, remember my story and start running. The counter never stops. The observation never ends. And I'm afraid that eventually they'll want more than just to watch. In 3 days, I fear 57,249 people will be tuning in to see exactly what happens to me. It's strange how the most life-changing discoveries can come from the most mundane tasks. 5 months ago, while cleaning up my digital clutter, I found something that has completely destroyed my sense of security and trust. I've moved house twice since then, changed my phone number, and still can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I'm writing this down partly as a warning, but mostly because keeping it to myself is driving me insane. I work in IT support for a university in Manchester. Nothing glamorous, just fixing printers, resetting passwords, and explaining to professors why they shouldn't click on suspicious email links. I've always been organized with my physical possessions, but absolutely terrible with digital housekeeping. My desktop was always a mess of random files. My download folder, a digital wasteland of forgotten PDFs and installation packages. My bad habits caught up with me when my laptop started running painfully slow. After putting it off for months, I finally set aside a Sunday afternoon to do a proper digital cleanup. I was living alone in a small flat near the university, having recently broken up with my girlfriend of 3 years. She'd moved to Edinburgh for work, and neither of us wanted the hassle of a long-distance relationship. So there I was, single again, at 32, spending my weekend deleting old files, while rain pelted against my windows. I started with the obvious stuff, emptying the recycle bin, clearing my downloads folder, uninstalling unused programs. Then I moved on to my email accounts, where years of newsletters, promotional offers, and spam had accumulated. I had 3 accounts that needed attention: my work email, my personal Gmail, and an old Hotmail account I'd had since university that I mainly kept for nostalgia and as a backup. The Hotmail account was the worst. Over 15,000 unread messages dating back to 2008. I was about to mass delete everything when I noticed the junk folder had a notification showing 246 items. Curious about what the spam filter had caught, I clicked on it. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect: penis enlargement offers, fake lottery wins, phishing attempts. But as I scrolled down, I noticed something odd. There were several emails from the same address, just a string of numbers and letters at a domain I didn't recognize. Each had an attachment named with a date, going back about 2 years. The most recent one was from just a week earlier. Now, I know better than to open random attachments, especially from my junk folder. That's literally part of what I teach in the basic IT security workshops for new staff. But something about the systematic naming and regular frequency made me pause. These didn't look like typical spam. They looked almost like scheduled reports. Against my better judgment, I opened the most recent email. There was no message, just a text file attachment. I scanned it with my antivirus before opening it, and it came back clean. When I opened the file, I found what appeared to be login credentials and instructions. There was a long string of characters labeled onion URL, followed by a username and password. Below that were brief instructions. Use Tor browser only. Log in within 24 hours of receipt or credentials will reset. Do not share access. Monthly payment confirmed. I recognized the reference to an onion URL and Tor. This was clearly related to the dark web. But why was someone sending these details to my old email address? And what was this about a monthly payment? I checked the other emails and found they all contained similar text files, each with different credentials but the same instructions. The dates corresponded to the first day of each month, like clockwork. My first thought was that these were meant for someone else. Perhaps the previous owner of my email address, though I'd had this account since I was an undergraduate. My second thought was more unsettling. What if someone was using my forgotten email account for something illegal? I should have deleted everything right then, should have changed my password, set up 2-factor authentication, and forgotten all about it. But curiosity is a powerful force, especially when you're bored and alone on a rainy Sunday. I told myself I was just being responsible. If someone was using my email for something illegal, I should know about it, right? So I downloaded the Tor browser, something I'd never used before despite working in IT. I told myself it was just research, that I would take a quick look and then report anything suspicious to the proper authorities. I copied the onion URL from the text file and pasted it into the Tor browser. It directed me to what looked like a login page with a minimalist black background. No site name, no logo, no indication of what this was for. Just username and password fields. Heart racing, I entered the credentials from the text file. The site loaded to what appeared to be a video hosting platform, similar to YouTube but with a much simpler interface. There were about 24 thumbnails organized in a grid, each showing what looked like CCTV footage of different rooms in a house. Some showed living rooms, others bedrooms, kitchens, even bathrooms. Each thumbnail had a date and timestamp from the previous month. I clicked on one that showed a living room. The video played, showing a completely ordinary scene. A woman in her 30s sitting on a sofa watching television while scrolling on her phone. The footage lasted about 5 minutes. during which nothing remarkable happened. She got up at one point to leave the room, came back with a glass of water, and resumed watching TV. I tried another video, this one of a kitchen. A man was cooking dinner while listening to music. Again, completely mundane. I clicked through several more videos, all showing similar everyday moments in people's lives. It was like watching the most boring reality show ever made. Then it hit me. These weren't actors. These weren't people who knew they were being filmed. These were private moments in private homes, recorded without consent. I was looking at footage from hacked security cameras or compromised devices. My stomach churned as the implications sank in. Someone had been using my forgotten email account as a way to distribute access to what amounted to illegal surveillance. And according to the instructions, someone was paying monthly for this access. I immediately closed the browser, feeling sick with guilt and fear. I just watched people who had no idea they were being observed. I'd invaded their privacy, even if unintentionally. And now my IP address was connected to this site, even though I'd used Tor. I spent the next hour changing all my passwords, enabling two-factor authentication on every account I had, and scanning my computer for malware. I debated whether to report what I'd found to the police, but hesitated. How would I explain that I'd accessed the site? Would they believe I had stumbled upon it innocently? Instead, I decided to send an anonymous tip to the cybercrime unit, providing the email address and a general description of what I'd found, but not mentioning my connection to it. I hoped they would investigate and shut down whatever operation this was. For the next week, I jumped at every notification on my phone, half expecting police to show up at my door. Nothing happened. No response to my tip. No suspicious activity on any of my accounts. I started to relax a little, telling myself that I'd done the right thing and could now move on. Then, exactly 1 month after discovering the emails, I received a message on my personal Gmail account, the one I actually used regularly. The subject line was missed payment, and it was from the same string of numbers and letters as the Hotmail emails. The message was brief. Payment interrupted. Service will terminate unless restored within 48 hours. Recent access from unauthorized location has been noted. My blood ran cold. Whoever was behind this knew that someone different had accessed the account. They had connected my old Hotmail to my current Gmail. They knew who I was. That same night, I noticed something strange while watching Netflix on my laptop. The webcam light briefly flickered on, then off. It could have been a glitch, but combined with the email, it sent me into a panic. I covered the camera with tape, but the damage to my peace of mind was done. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. I was convinced my devices had been compromised, that someone was watching me through my own technology. I started unplugging my router at night, covering all camera lenses, even disconnecting my smart TV. 2 weeks after the missed payment email, I came home from work to find my flat had been broken into. Nothing valuable was taken. Not my laptop, not my TV, not even the cash I kept in my desk drawer. The only thing disturbed was my bedside table, where my diary had been moved. I reported the break-in to the police, but without anything stolen, they didn't seem particularly concerned. I didn't tell them about the emails or the website. It seemed too disconnected, too paranoid. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the building, every passing car outside, sent my heart racing. Around 3 a.m., I got up to make tea and noticed my laptop was open on the kitchen table, not where I'd left it, and certainly not how I'd left it. On the screen was a text document containing addresses and personal information about the people I'd seen in those videos. Below their information was my own, my full name, address, workplace, parents' address, and the routes I typically took to work. At the bottom was a simple message: witnesses are participants. Participants are responsible. I packed a bag and left that night, staying with a friend while I looked for a new place to live. I told everyone I'd had a plumbing disaster in my flat that made it uninhabitable. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, even considered changing jobs. It's been 5 months since then. I've moved twice, switching cities entirely the second time. I live completely offline now. No social media, no cloud storage, no smart devices. I'm writing this on a new laptop that has never been connected to my name in any way. But sometimes I still see the webcam light flicker when I'm working late. Sometimes I receive blank emails from addresses I don't recognize. And last week, I found a note on my car windscreen with just an Onion URL written on it. Different from the original one, but unmistakably similar in format. I don't know who these people are or why they chose my forgotten email account for their operation. I don't know if they're still watching those unsuspecting people or if they're now watching me instead. All I know is that somewhere in the vastness of the dark web, there are people who consider me a loose end that needs tying up. So if you ever find something unexpected while clearing out your digital junk, something that doesn't quite make sense, something that perhaps wasn't meant for you, delete it, close it, forget you ever saw it, because once you've seen something you shouldn't, there's no going back. And in the dark corners of the internet, there are people who will go to extraordinary lengths to protect their secrets. Found you. I think the most important lesson I've learned is that some threats don't announce themselves with dramatic music or warning signs. They slip quietly into your life through the devices you trust most. I learned this 3 months ago, and I haven't slept properly since. I work in digital marketing for a medium-sized agency in Bristol. Nothing particularly exciting, mostly managing social media campaigns and designing promotional materials for local businesses. I've always been glued to my phone, both for work and personal use. My girlfriend used to joke that I'd scroll through Instagram, even during the apocalypse. Ex-girlfriend now, actually. We broke up around a month before all this started. Nothing dramatic. Just one of those relationships that gradually fades out when you realize you're better as friends. After the breakup, I moved into a small flat on the outskirts of the city. One of those newer builds with paper-thin walls where you can hear your neighbors sneeze. I developed this habit of scrolling through my phone in bed before sleep. Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever would keep my mind occupied. I'd always leave my AirDrop on, mainly because I frequently shared files between my phone and laptop, and I was too lazy to keep turning it on and off. I never really thought about the security implications. Why would I? I lived in a decent area, and most AirDrop requests were just people sharing memes on public transport. It was a Tuesday night in early March when it happened. I remember because I'd had a particularly tedious day at work dealing with a client who couldn't decide what shade of blue they wanted for their logo. I'd gotten into bed around midnight, flat dark except for the blue glow of my phone screen, illuminating my face as I mindlessly scrolled through social media. Outside, a light rain tapped against my bedroom window, and somewhere in the distance, a car alarm kept going off intermittently. That's when the AirDrop notification appeared on my screen. Unknown device would like to share a photo. The preview thumbnail was too small to make out clearly, but it looked like some kind of map or location pin. Normally, I'd have declined any random airdrop requests, but something about being half asleep and curious made me accept it. It's amazing how one thoughtless tap can change everything. The photo loaded, and I immediately felt more alert. It was a Google Maps screenshot with a red pin dropped on a specific location. Below the image were coordinates typed in plain text. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably someone trying to send their location to a friend and accidentally airdropping it to me instead. But something about it made me uncomfortable enough to actually check the coordinates. I copied the numbers and pasted them into Google Maps. The map centered and zoomed in on a location that made my blood run cold. It was my street. Not just my street, but specifically my block of flats. I sat up in bed suddenly wide awake. This had to be a coincidence, right? Maybe a neighbor was trying to send their address to someone and misclicked. I stared at my phone, half expecting another airdrop to come through with an apology or explanation. None came. I got out of bed and went to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out at the street below. The rain had picked up, blurring the streetlights into hazy orange globes. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. No suspicious figures standing under lampposts. No parked cars with people sitting inside them. Just the empty street, wet pavement reflecting the lights. I turned off AirDrop, put my phone on silent, and tried to sleep. I told myself it was nothing. A random coincidence, a technical glitch, or at worst, some neighbor playing a prank. But sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about those coordinates and how precisely they matched my location. The next morning, I'd almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. In the harsh light of day, the incident seemed less sinister. I even turned AirDrop back on, though I set it to contacts only rather than everyone. I went to work, had another mundane day arguing about color schemes, and returned home feeling foolish about my midnight paranoia. That night, as I was once again in bed scrolling through my phone, another notification appeared. Not AirDrop this time, but an email. The subject line was simply the same coordinates from the night before. The sender's address was a random string of numbers and letters at a domain I didn't recognize. My thumb hovered over the notification for several seconds before I finally tapped it. The email contained no text, just an attachment, a photo. When I opened it, I felt my stomach drop. It was a picture of me from earlier that day, standing at my kitchen window, washing dishes. The photo had clearly been taken from somewhere outside my flat, looking in. I immediately closed the blinds and checked that my door was locked. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved from room to room, making sure all windows were secured. I considered calling the police but hesitated. What would I tell them? That someone sent me coordinates and a photo? They'd hardly consider that an emergency. Instead, I called a friend who works in IT security. I tried to sound calm as I explained what had happened, but there was an edge to my voice that I couldn't hide. He asked about my online presence, whether I'd made anyone angry recently, if I used the same passwords across multiple sites, standard security questions that did nothing to address the fact that someone was physically watching me. He suggested I reset all my passwords, enable two-factor authentication, and check for any unusual apps or permissions on my devices. I did all of that, and also went through my social media, removing location tags from photos and tightening privacy settings. For good measure, I disconnected my smart TV and even put tape over my laptop's webcam. Paranoid, perhaps, but at that point, I didn't care. I barely slept that night, keeping one eye on the door and the other on my phone, which I'd set to airplane mode. The next day at work, I was distracted and irritable. Every notification made me jump, and I kept feeling like someone was watching me. My boss noticed and suggested I take the rest of the week off. I didn't argue. When I got home, I found a small package leaning against my door. No postmark, no delivery information, just a padded envelope with my name handwritten on the front. I stood in the hallway staring at it for what felt like minutes, afraid to touch it. Eventually, I used a pen to drag it inside before closing and locking the door behind me. I should have called the police then. I should have left it unopened. But curiosity, that same fatal curiosity that had made me accept the airdrop, got the better of me. I carefully opened the envelope, half expecting it to contain something dangerous. Inside was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. The paper contained more coordinates, different from the first set. When I checked them on my phone, they pointed to a location about 20 miles outside the city, in a rural area I wasn't familiar with. Against my better judgment, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained a single video file. I clicked play and immediately wished I hadn't. The video showed someone, me, from various angles throughout the previous week. Me leaving my flat in the morning. Me at a cafe near my office. Me shopping at the supermarket. Me through the windows of my flat at night. The footage was clearly taken over several days from different locations, sometimes zoomed in from a distance, sometimes from frighteningly close proximity. The final clip was the most disturbing. It showed me asleep in my bed, filmed from inside my bedroom. The camera moved closer until it was directly over me, looking down at my unconscious face. A gloved hand appeared in the frame, hovering just above my cheek, not quite touching. The video ended with text appearing on screen. The coordinates are a meeting place. Come alone tomorrow at midnight, or the next video goes to everyone in your contact list. I know things about you that would destroy your life. I ripped the USB drive out of my laptop and threw it across the room. Someone had been in my flat. Someone had stood over me while I slept. I grabbed my phone and keys and ran out the door, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove straight to a friend's house on the other side of the city. I told my friend I'd had a break-in, which wasn't entirely untrue. I spent that night on their sofa, jumping at every sound. In the morning, I went to the police station and reported everything. The airdrop, the email, the USB, the video. They took it seriously, especially the footage from inside my flat, but warned me that these cases were difficult to solve. Whoever was doing this was tech-savvy and careful. They advised me not to go to the coordinates and to stay with friends until they could investigate further. I didn't go to the meeting place, of course. I'm not that stupid. Instead, I stayed at my friend's place, changed all my contact information, and eventually moved to a different city altogether. The police never found who was responsible. They suggested it might be connected to the dark web, possibly someone who had accessed my personal information through data breaches and decided to target me for their own twisted entertainment. It's been 3 months now. I've moved twice more since then. I don't use social media anymore. I've changed my name. I keep AirDrop permanently disabled and check for cameras everywhere I go. I sleep with the lights on when I manage to sleep at all. No more videos have appeared, no more coordinates. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I could swear I hear the soft click of a camera shutter. And occasionally, my phone will light up with a notification from an unknown sender that disappears before I can open it. The police have a theory that I was targeted through a dark web service where people pay to have strangers stalked, a form of entertainment for those sick enough to enjoy watching someone's life unravel from fear. They call it real-life streaming, or surveillance tourism. The idea that someone paid to watch me, to terrify me, to turn my life into their personal horror show, keeps me awake at night more than any bump in the dark ever could. Because the thing about the dark web is that it's not just some abstract digital space. It's a marketplace where your privacy, your security, your peace of mind can be bought and sold without your knowledge. And once you've been chosen, you never really know if they've stopped watching or just gotten better at hiding. Sometimes I wonder about those coordinates, about what would have happened if I'd gone to that meeting place. But I know I made the right choice. Some questions are better left unanswered, because on the dark web, your life is just content for someone else's entertainment, and the show only ends when they decide it does. I always thought people who stumbled onto terrible things were careless or unlucky. Now I know better. Sometimes all it takes is one wrong click, one moment of misplaced curiosity. I'm not writing this from my flat in Bristol anymore. I'm in a budget hotel somewhere along the M4, using public Wi-Fi through multiple proxies. Not that it matters. They've proven they can find me regardless of what technical precautions I take. I have approximately 36 hours before the event they've scheduled, before I become the star of my own horror show. My life was ordinary before all this. I worked as a research assistant at a digital crime unit attached to the University of West England. Nothing glamorous, mostly compiling statistics on cyber fraud and organizing case studies for academics to analyze. I was studying for my master's in digital forensics, hoping to eventually work with the Serious Crime Directorate. The irony isn't lost on me. It started 3 months ago when I was gathering data for a paper on digital black markets. My supervisor had the proper clearances, so I had access to archives of seized dark web marketplaces. These were sanitized versions, of course, with the most disturbing content removed. I was only meant to be documenting transaction patterns for illegal goods, counterfeit currency, prescription medications, fraudulent documents, standard stuff, nothing that would give you nightmares. I noticed something odd in the data, transaction patterns that didn't match the documented goods. Large cryptocurrency transfers happening at scheduled times with no corresponding product listings. Just numbered slots and user counts, sometimes reaching into the thousands. The records were fragmentary since most had been redacted, but there was a pattern if you knew what to look for. My job was pattern recognition, after all. I made the mistake of asking my supervisor about these anomalies. His reaction was odd, dismissive at first, then strangely concerned. He took my notes, told me to focus on the established parameters of the research, and said he'd look into it. That should have been my first warning. The second came a week later when I found my database. Access had been quietly restricted. Curiosity is a powerful motivator, especially when combined with wounded professional pride. If I'd been sensible, I would have left it alone. Instead, I began using my personal laptop after hours, accessing Tor networks through my home internet. My reasoning was sound. How could I properly study digital black markets if I was only seeing the sanitized version? How could I contribute meaningfully to research if I didn't understand what was being hidden? I wasn't looking for anything horrible. I was looking for answers to academic questions. That's what I told myself. The dark web itself wasn't particularly shocking. Most of it was just forums and marketplaces with clunky interfaces that looked like websites from the early 2000s. What was interesting were the patterns, how users communicated, how trust was established, how transactions were verified. I created a throwaway account to observe these spaces without participating. I never bought anything. never engaged with anyone. Just mapped the networks, documented the patterns, convinced myself this was still research. After weeks of observation, I began noticing references to private broadcasts and interactive experiences. These were always accompanied by significant cryptocurrency requirements and complex verification processes. Most users dismissed them as scams or urban legends. The few who claimed to have participated were vague about details, but emphatic about the authenticity of the experience. I might have left it at that if I hadn't received an unexpected email to my university account. The subject line contained a string of numbers that matched one of the transaction patterns I documented. The body contained only a .onion URL and the words, "Observer application pending." I should have reported it immediately, should have forwarded it to my supervisor and university IT security. Instead, I copied the URL to my personal laptop and accessed it that evening from home. Academic curiosity, I told myself. Need to understand the full scope of what I was researching. The site was minimalist. Black background with a simple form requesting verification. I didn't enter anything, just observed. At the bottom was a counter showing 8,731. As I watched, it ticked up to 8,732. Active viewers, I assumed. For what, I wasn't yet sure. I closed the browser and shut down my laptop, suddenly uncomfortable. The next morning, I had another email, this time to my personal account. Same subject line of numbers, but this time the message read, "Observer status approved. Verification waived. Orientation, Tuesday, 2200 hours GMT." I hadn't entered any information, hadn't provided my personal email. The rational explanation was that the university system had been compromised, and someone had connected my research queries to my personal information. I changed all my passwords, ran malware scans, and resolved to report the security breach in the morning. That night, my laptop turned itself on at precisely 10 p.m. The screen showed a loading page, then resolved to a video feed of a room. Concrete walls, harsh lighting, a metal table in the center. The video quality was poor, but clear enough to see that the room was empty except for various implements arranged on the table. In the corner of the screen was that counter again, now showing 12,416 and steadily increasing. A chat window opened on the right side of the screen. Messages scrolled by too quickly to read, but I caught phrases like "waiting for subject" and "bidding opens at acquisition." The terminology was clinical, detached. Then a message appeared, highlighted in red. "New observer identified. Location, Bristol, BS16. Confirmation required." I slammed the laptop shut and unplugged it. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it. I considered destroying it right then, but I needed evidence of what I'd seen. Instead, I put it in a drawer and spent the night at a friend's flat, claiming a power outage at mine. In the morning, I went straight to my supervisor's office. He wasn't there. His assistant said he'd taken unexpected leave and wouldn't return for several weeks. I tried explaining the situation to the department head, but without my supervisor to confirm my research parameters, it sounded like I'd been accessing dark websites for personal reasons. I was told to take a week off and that there would be a review of my research activities. When I returned to my flat that evening, my laptop was sitting open on my desk. I'd left it in a drawer. On the screen was an image of me, taken through my own webcam, sleeping in my bed from 2 nights before. Below it was text: "Observer status revoked. Participant status pending approval. Current bids, 23 inches. I grabbed essential documents and left immediately. Checked into a hotel on the outskirts of the city. Used cash. called in sick to both work and my classes. Used the hotel business center to email my resignation from the research position, citing personal reasons. I spent the next 3 days moving between hotels, trying to understand what was happening. I bought a burner phone, contacted a friend who worked in cybersecurity. He agreed to meet me in a public place, a busy cafe in the city center. I arrived early, chose a table with a view of both entrances. He never showed. Instead, I received a text on my new phone, which I'd given to no one except him. Meeting cancelled. Observer count 31,842. Role reassignment complete. I left my half-finished tea on the table and walked out, fighting panic. In the reflection of a shop window across the street, I noticed someone photographing me with a professional camera. When I turned to look, they were gone. That night, I dreamed of a concrete room and woke to find an envelope had been slid under my hotel room door. Inside was a plastic key card and a note with an address in Cardiff and a time, 2000 hours tomorrow. Transport provided if required. Non-attendance will result in collection. I checked out immediately and took the first train to Edinburgh. Paid cash for another hotel. That afternoon, while walking through Princes Street Gardens, a well-dressed woman sat next to me on a bench. She placed a manila envelope between us and walked away before I could speak. Inside was a printout of my current location, timestamped from 10 minutes earlier, and a revised schedule. Procedure delayed due to travel. New time, 2000 hours, Thursday. Viewer count, 47,103. Premium access sold out. I'm not writing this from Edinburgh. I moved again after that. I've been moving constantly, staying one step ahead, but they always find me. The most terrifying part is that I've never seen the same person twice. Different people leave messages, take photos, deliver reminders. It's as if there's an invisible network of watchers, all connected to whatever this is. I've pieced together what I believe is happening. The Red Rooms aren't urban legends. They're real, but not in the way most people imagine. They're not hosted on shadowy servers by mysterious organizations. They're crowdsourced horror, orchestrated through distributed networks of participants who are both observers and facilitators. Regular people who participate in the surveillance, the planning, the execution, each doing one small part, none having to bear the full moral weight of what they're contributing to. The broadcasts are carefully planned events where someone transitions from observer to subject. Sometimes it's punishment for breaking rules. Sometimes it's random selection. Sometimes it's based on viewer voting. I don't know which category I fall into. Yesterday, I received a final notification, not through email or text, but written on my bathroom mirror when I returned from getting breakfast. Broadcast scheduled. Participants en route. Viewer count, 58,904. I left immediately, bringing only what I could carry in my pockets. No phone, no laptop, nothing that could be tracked. Yet somehow, they keep finding me. I've switched hotels twice since then. Each time I find evidence that they've been in my room. Small things moved, messages left, a countdown to my scheduled broadcast. I've considered going to the police, but what would I tell them? That I'm being hunted by an invisible network of people coordinating through the dark web? That thousands of people are waiting to watch whatever happens to me at 8 p.m. tomorrow? I have no evidence except the messages, which could easily have been self-manufactured. No witnesses. No credibility after resigning from my research position under suspicious circumstances. This morning, I found a key card in my coat pocket that I never put there. It matches the one from the envelope days ago. There was also a business card for a taxi company and a time. I think about the concrete room, the metal table, the implements. I think about the 58,904 people waiting to watch. I wonder how many of them I've passed on the street, sat next to on trains. How many hotel clerks, baristas, shop assistants are part of this network? Are they paid to participate, or do they do it for entertainment, for the thrill of being part of something secret and terrible? I keep thinking about the pattern I first noticed in those transaction records, the numbered slots, the user counts. Was I documenting my own future without realizing it? The most disturbing realization is that this system relies on ordinary people choosing to participate. Each person does one small thing, takes a photo, delivers a message, leaves a key card. None of them has to consider themselves responsible for the ultimate outcome. They're just following instructions from an app or a message board, earning cryptocurrency or credits or whatever motivates them. The horror is in the mundanity of it. I'm writing this now as a warning. I don't know if I'll be able to avoid what's scheduled for tomorrow night. I don't know if this invisible network can be evaded indefinitely. They seem to anticipate every move, have access to every system. If you're reading this and you've been researching similar topics, stop now. If you've received unexpected messages about observer status or seen unexplained counters on websites you've visited, you're already in the system. If strangers seem to know things about you they shouldn't, if you feel watched, if small objects in your home are moved when you return, run. Keep running. Trust no one. I have to move again now. The hotel clerk just called to tell me there's a package waiting at reception. I didn't order anything. Didn't tell anyone where I am. The countdown shows 26 hours remaining, almost 60,000 people waiting, and somewhere, a concrete room is being prepared. The worst decisions in life often start with the phrase, "How bad could it be?" 6 months ago, I found out exactly how bad it could be when I decided to pick up a package from a dark web marketplace. I still check my locks 3 times before bed, still flinch at unexpected knocks on the door, still scan crowds for faces I hope never to see. Writing this down feels dangerous, but keeping it bottled up is slowly driving me insane. I'm just an ordinary bloke from Manchester, working graphic design, live in a small flat with my cat. Nothing special about me. I've always been fascinated by technology though. Built my first computer at 12, taught myself coding at 15, that sort of thing. This fascination eventually led me to the dark web about 3 years ago. At first, it was just curiosity, wanting to see if it was really as mysterious as people made it out to be. For the first couple of years, I just browsed anonymously, looking at marketplaces selling counterfeit goods, banned books, that kind of thing. Never bought anything, never interacted with anyone. Just a digital tourist, watching from a safe distance. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, isn't it? It pulls you in deeper and deeper until you're in over your head. It started after a bad breakup last year. I was feeling pretty low, spending most nights alone with a bottle of whiskey, browsing parts of the internet I probably shouldn't have been. There was this forum I frequented where people discussed hard-to-find items, vintage electronics, discontinued products, rare collectibles, the kind of stuff you can't just get on Amazon. One night, I saw a post about a retro gaming console that had never been officially released, a prototype that supposedly had games on it that were never made public. As a massive gaming nerd, this immediately caught my interest. The poster claimed to have acquired it from a former game developer and was willing to sell it for cryptocurrency. The price was steep, but not outrageous. About £800 in Bitcoin. After a week of back and forth messages and too many late nights staring at my screen, I decided to go for it. I'd never made a purchase on the dark web before, but I convinced myself this wasn't like buying drugs or weapons. It was just a rare gaming item. The seller had good reviews from other forum members, and they agreed to a dead drop exchange rather than posting it, which felt safer somehow. For those who don't know, a dead drop is when the seller leaves the item in a predetermined location, and you pick it up after they've gone. No face-to-face meeting, no names exchanged, completely anonymous. The seller gave me coordinates to a location on the outskirts of Manchester, an abandoned industrial estate that had been scheduled for demolition for years but was still standing. I know how this sounds, red flags everywhere, but I convinced myself this was just how these transactions worked. The place would be deserted. I'd grab the package and be back home playing unreleased games from the 90s within an hour. The pickup was scheduled for 10 p.m. on a Friday in November. It was already dark by 4:30, and a light drizzle had been falling all day, making the streets gleam under the streetlights. I drove to a car park about half a mile from the location, figuring it would be safer to approach on foot. The rational part of my brain was finally raising some objections, suggesting that maybe meeting a stranger from the dark web at an abandoned factory wasn't the best idea I'd ever had. The industrial estate was exactly as depressing as you'd expect. Crumbling brick buildings with broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, and rusting chain-link fences with no trespassing signs hanging at odd angles. The only light came from a single street lamp at the entrance and the occasional passing headlights from the distant main road. Following the GPS on my phone, I made my way to the specific building the seller had described. It was an old warehouse with most of its roof missing, the inside a cavernous space filled with shadows. The dead drop location was supposedly just inside the main entrance. Behind the third column on the left, inside a blue plastic container. I switched on my phone's torch and stepped inside, the beam creating more shadows than it dispelled. The floor was littered with debris, broken glass, empty cans, chunks of fallen ceiling. Every step echoed in the empty space, and I could hear water dripping somewhere in the darkness beyond my light's reach. I found the third column, and sure enough, there was a blue plastic storage box behind it. It was smaller than I expected, about the size of a shoebox. I picked it up, surprised by how light it felt. This wasn't a gaming console, unless it was just components. That's when I noticed something odd. The box was warm, not hot, but definitely above ambient temperature, as if it had been sitting in a heated room rather than a freezing abandoned warehouse. I should have left right then, should have put the box down and walked away. But instead, I opened it. Inside was a single smartphone, not a gaming console, not even close to what I'd been promised. It was an older model, nothing special. The screen was dark, but as soon as I touched it, it lit up. No lock screen, just a video player already open, showing a paused video. The thumbnail was dark and unclear. Standing there in that cold, empty building, I pressed play. The video showed a room I didn't recognize, some kind of basement or cellar with concrete walls. In the center was a person tied to a chair, head covered with a black bag. Someone moved into frame, wearing gloves and a mask that covered their entire face. They held up a piece of paper with today's date written on it, then a second paper with my username from the forum. My blood turned to ice. I nearly dropped the phone as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't a scam in the traditional sense. I wasn't being sold a fake item. This was something much worse. The video continued, showing the masked person removing the bag from the captive's head. I won't describe what happened next. I couldn't watch it all. I shut the video off after less than a minute, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. That's when I heard it. Footsteps on the gravel outside the warehouse. Multiple sets, getting closer. In a moment of panic-induced clarity, I switched off my torch, dropped the phone back in the box, and moved as quickly and quietly as possible toward the back of the warehouse. There was a door there. I'd noticed it on my way in. I had no idea where it led, but it had to be better than staying. I made it through the door, just as beams of torchlight swept into the warehouse from the main entrance. The back door led to a narrow alley between buildings. I ran, not caring about the noise now, just needing to put as much distance between myself and whoever had followed me there. I made it back to my car without seeing anyone, drove home with my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest, and spent the night with my furniture pushed against the door, convinced that whoever had set this up would be coming for me next. The next day, after no sleep and too much coffee, I tried to make sense of what had happened. Best case scenario, the video was fake, some sick prank to scare dark web tourists like me. Worst case, I couldn't even bring myself to consider the worst case, that I had somehow, unwittingly, paid for someone to be hurt, that my Bitcoin transaction had funded something unspeakable. I spent the next week in a state of paranoia, jumping at every sound, convinced I was being followed. I changed all my passwords, wiped my computer, threw away the hard drive. I even considered going to the police, but what would I say? That I'd tried to buy illegal merchandise on the dark web and may have accidentally funded a violent crime. That I'd handled a phone that potentially contained evidence of such a crime and then left it behind. After a month of constant anxiety, I moved to a different city. I told everyone it was for a new job, but really, I just couldn't stand being in Manchester anymore. Couldn't walk past that industrial estate on my way to work. Couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It's been 6 months now. I haven't been back on the dark web, haven't even used Tor. I checked the local Manchester news obsessively for reports of bodies found in abandoned buildings, but nothing has ever come up that matches what I saw. Sometimes I managed to convince myself it was all an elaborate hoax, that the video was staged, the follow-up footsteps just a coincidence. But then I remember how real it looked, how the person's eyes widened in genuine fear when the bag was removed, how the phone was warm, as if it had recently been in someone's pocket, how specific the message was, with my username clearly displayed. I don't know if I was set up from the beginning or if I just got caught in something bigger and more terrible than I could have imagined. All I know is that the dark web isn't just some harmless playground for the technologically curious. It's a place where real people do real harm, and sometimes your curiosity can make you complicit in ways you never intended. I still have nightmares about that video. Still wonder who the person in the chair was and if there was anything I could have done to help them. Still wonder if somewhere out there, someone has my name on a list because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. So that's my story. A warning, I suppose, about the dangers of thinking you can dip your toes into the darker parts of the internet without consequences. Some things can't be unseen, and some curiosities come with costs far higher than you're willing to pay. I still remember how normal Jamie looked on my screen that night. The same messy bedroom in the background, the same faded band poster on the wall, the same person I'd known since secondary school, smiling at me through my laptop. There wasn't a single warning sign that in just a few minutes, everything I thought I knew about about my oldest friend would shatter, leaving me trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I'm writing this down because I need to process what happened, but I can't bring myself to tell a therapist. They'd be obligated to report it, and honestly, I'm terrified of what might happen if this gets out. So I'm putting it here anonymously, hoping that maybe someone will understand or at least learn from my experience. Perhaps writing it out will help me make sense of how someone I trusted completely could do something so horrific. Last winter, I was in my final year at university in Edinburgh, while Jamie was working in London. We'd been close since we were 13, the kind of friendship that survives distance and time. We had a standing FaceTime call every other Thursday, just to catch up and stay connected despite being hundreds of miles apart. These calls were a highlight in my otherwise stressful week of coursework and part-time jobs. Just a normal ritual between friends, nothing unusual or concerning about it. That particular Thursday in November was miserable outside, raining so hard I could hear it drumming against my window in the student flat. I remember being grateful I didn't have to go anywhere that evening. I'd made a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and settled in for our usual hour-long chat. The call connected, and there was Alex, looking slightly tired but smiling as always. The first 20 minutes were completely normal. We talked about our weeks, complained about work and studies, gossiped about mutual friends. Jamie had recently started a new job at a tech company, something to do with cybersecurity that I didn't fully understand, but sounded impressive. There had been a lot of talk about dark web monitoring and threat assessment, terms that meant little to me at the time, but would soon take on a horrifying new significance. I noticed Jamie seemed a bit distracted, occasionally glancing to the side at something off screen. I didn't think much of it, probably just checking messages or emails. But then there was a shift in the conversation. Jamie asked if I was alone in my flat, if my roommates were out for the evening. They were, a detail I confirmed without hesitation, because why wouldn't I? This was Jamie after all. That's when everything changed. Jamie's expression became more serious, more focused. There was this intensity in those eyes that I'd never seen before. Jamie leaned closer to the camera and said that there was something important to show me, something I needed to see to understand the work being done at the new company. I remember feeling a flicker of unease at the sudden change in tone, but I brushed it off. This was my oldest friend, someone I trusted implicitly. When Jamie said to keep an open mind about what I was about to see, I nodded, curious but unsuspecting. Jamie's screen went black for a moment, then changed to a screen share. I expected to see some kind of technical diagram or perhaps a presentation. Instead, the screen filled with what looked like a video feed of a room I didn't recognize. The space was dimly lit with a reddish tint, giving everything a surreal, almost dreamlike quality. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Just a sparse room with concrete walls, what looked like a metal table, and some shapes I couldn't quite distinguish. Then the camera angle shifted slightly, and I realized with a jolt that there was a person in the room, strapped to a chair. They were struggling against their restraints, their movements desperate and terrified. The video quality was good enough that I could see the fear in their eyes, the way their chest heaved with panicked breathing. I felt my stomach drop. My first thought was that this must be some kind of prank, or maybe a clip from a horror film Alex was showing me as a joke. But deep down, I knew immediately that what I was seeing was real. There was an authenticity to the fear in that person's eyes that no actor could replicate. On the side of the screen, there was some kind of chat interface where messages were scrolling by too quickly to read. At the bottom were buttons or commands with labels I couldn't quite make out from my view. It looked like some kind of interactive live stream, but unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I was frozen in shock, unable to process what was happening. before I could even form words to ask what the hell was going on. Jamie's voice came through, explaining that this was what was called a red room on the dark web, a live stream where viewers could watch and even request acts of violence in real time. Jamie spoke with a detached fascination, like this was an interesting documentary we were watching together, rather than a real person in terror. The worst part was how casual Jamie sounded, while explaining that the company wasn't just monitoring these sites, they were running some of them. That this was where the real money was in cybersecurity, creating and managing these illegal streams for wealthy clients who paid thousands to watch or participate. I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Alex, my friend since childhood, showing me something so horrific with such calm detachment. But the video continued playing, and the person in the chair continued struggling, and Alex continued explaining how the whole operation worked. Then came the moment that still haunts my nightmares. Jamie said that the company had been impressed with my psychology background and computer skills, that they'd been watching me through Jamie for months, that they thought I had potential to join their special projects team, and to prove I was suitable, I needed to participate tonight. The camera on my laptop suddenly lit up, indicating it was active even though I hadn't touched it. On Alex's shared screen, my face appeared in a small window above the video feed. My name appeared in the chat scroll. Whoever was running this stream now knew who I was. I could see my own horrified expression alongside the victim in the room. I tried to end the call, but my computer wouldn't respond. I tried to close the laptop, but Jamie's voice sharpened, warning me that closing the connection now would be seen as rejection of their offer. And they didn't allow people to reject offers once they'd seen what I'd seen. The implication was clear. I was being recorded watching this. I was now implicated, my face and name captured alongside this horrific content. If I didn't cooperate, that recording could be sent to the police, to my university, to my family, or worse, I could end up like the person in that chair. My mind was spinning with panic and betrayal. This person I'd trusted for over a decade had just dragged me into something nightmarish without my consent. Had Jamie always been this person? Or had something changed? I couldn't reconcile the friend I thought I knew with the monster on my screen. Jamie instructed me to select one of the commands from the menu that had appeared on my screen. Simple options were available for first-time participants, I was told. Nothing too extreme. Just enough to prove my commitment. I felt physically sick, tears streaming down my face as I realized the impossible situation I was in. If I participated, I would be complicit in someone's suffering. If I refused, I could be implicated or become a victim myself. There seemed to be no way out. In desperation, I yanked my router's power cable from the wall, cutting my internet connection entirely. The screen froze, then went black. The silence in my flat was deafening after the intensity of what had just happened. I sat there shaking for what felt like hours, expecting my phone to ring, expecting someone to knock on my door, expecting some immediate consequence for my refusal to participate. But nothing happened that night. The next day, I went to the campus IT department and had them check my laptop for any spyware or malicious software. I made up a story about getting strange pop-ups. They found nothing unusual. I changed all my passwords, deleted my social media accounts, and bought a new laptop just to be safe. I never heard from Jamie again. My messages went unanswered. Social media profiles disappeared. Mutual friends said they hadn't been in touch either. It was as if Jamie had vanished completely. For weeks afterward, I jumped at every notification, every unexpected sound. I covered my laptop camera with tape. I changed my phone number, moved to a different flat. I even considered dropping out of university and moving back home. But the fear that whatever Alex was involved with could find me there too kept me from running. It's been 6 months now. Sometimes I almost convince myself it was all some elaborate hoax or nightmare. But then I'll see a news story about dark web arrests, or I'll catch a glimpse of someone who resembles the person in that chair, and it all comes flooding back. I still don't know if Jamie was forced into recruiting me, if there really is a company using cybersecurity as a front for these streams, or if my oldest friend had been hiding a dark fascination that eventually evolved into participation. I don't know if I'm still being watched, or if cutting the connection that night was enough to remove me from their radar. What I do know is that trust is fragile, and the people closest to us can hide unimaginable secrets. I know that somewhere in the darkest corners of the internet, these rooms exist, and real people suffer while others watch. And I know that someone I love tried to drag me into that darkness. I check over my shoulder constantly now. I live with a persistent, gnawing fear that someday my laptop will turn on by itself, or my phone will ring with a FaceTime call from an unknown number, and I'll see that room again. Or worse, that someday I'll be the one in the chair, punishment for refusing to participate when given the chance. The most terrifying part isn't even the red room itself. It's that someone I trusted completely, someone whose face I would never have questioned seeing on my screen, was the doorway to that horror. And now, I can't trust any face at all. Everyone has a shadow self, the person we become when no one is watching, when the mask slips and our private thoughts emerge. I always considered mine relatively harmless. Late-night rabbit holes of research on obscure topics, occasionally watching people in cafes, imagining their lives, sometimes typing out angry emails I'd never send. Normal stuff. At least that's what I told myself. I teach digital media studies at a mid-tier university. It's not groundbreaking work, but it keeps me engaged, analyzing how technology shapes communication, behavior, and culture. My research specialty is online community formation, particularly around niche interests. This focus has taken me to some fascinating corners of the internet over the years, though always as an academic observer rather than a participant. 3 months ago, I began a new research project on anonymity and digital identity. The plan was straightforward. Examine how people behave differently in spaces where their real-world identity is disconnected from their online actions. I focused initially on anonymous forums, encrypted messaging platforms, and identity-obscuring applications. Standard academic research conducted within ethical guidelines, with IRB approval and proper protocols. What I didn't include in my research proposal was my growing curiosity about truly anonymous spaces, the layers of the internet inaccessible through standard browsers. I had read the academic literature on so-called dark web networks, understood their legitimate uses for privacy-conscious users, journalists, and dissidents, but I had never actually navigated those spaces myself. It represented a gap in my experiential knowledge, one that increasingly felt like a limitation in my research. So I installed a specialized browser, followed basic security protocols, and began exploring. The experience was initially underwhelming. The dark web resembled the early internet. Text-heavy pages with minimal design, slow loading times, frequent dead links. Most sites were marketplaces for illicit goods, financial services operating outside regulation, or forums discussing privacy technology and philosophy. Nothing particularly shocking or unexpected. About 2 weeks into my exploration, I discovered a subforum dedicated to discussing something called experience rooms. The conversation was deliberately vague, full of insider terminology and oblique references. Members debated the authenticity of various rooms, sharing technical criteria for evaluating legitimacy but never explicitly stating what these rooms actually contained. The ambiguity intrigued me professionally. It was a perfect example of how communities develop coded language to both include insiders and exclude outsiders. One username appeared consistently in these discussions: Analyst Prime. Unlike most participants who either celebrated or debunked various rooms, Analyst Prime took a clinical, almost academic approach. They discussed psychological profiles of viewers and subjects, reference engagement metrics and response patterns, and occasionally mentioned a research framework they had developed. Their posts contained the kind of analytical language I might use in my own academic work, which perhaps explains why I found them credible when others seemed like sensationalists. After observing the forum for several days, I sent Analyst Prime a private message explaining my research interest in anonymous communities and asking for clarification about these experience rooms they discuss so analytically. I expected to be ignored or rebuffed. Instead, I received a prompt response asking about my academic background and research methodologies. We exchanged several messages discussing psychology, digital ethnography, and observation bias. Analyst Prime eventually explained that experience rooms were live streaming platforms where viewers could observe people in various situations without the subject's knowledge. Most were fraudulent, pre-recorded content or paid actors pretending to be unwitting participants, but some, they claimed, were genuine. Analyst Prime described themselves as a behavioral researcher studying the psychology of both the observers and the observed in these environments. They offered to show me an authentic room for academic purposes. I should have declined. I should have ended the conversation, deleted the browser, and continued my research through legitimate channels. Instead, I told myself this was a unique research opportunity, a chance to understand a digital phenomenon firsthand, rather than through second-hand accounts. Analyst Prime sent me an address and access credentials for what they called an observation session, scheduled for 2 a.m. the following night. They explained that this particular stream would be appropriate for a first-time academic observer. No illegal activities, no explicit content, just authentic human behavior under observation conditions. They recommended I prepare by reading several psychological papers on voyeurism and surveillance effects, which they linked to normal web academic repositories. The legitimacy of these references lowered my guard further. At 1:55 a.m., sitting in my darkened home office, I accessed the address using the credentials provided. The site had a minimalist interface, black background, a video player in the center, a data panel to the right showing various metrics, and a small text field below for observer notes. No chat function, no visible usernames of other viewers. The video initially showed an empty room, white walls, hardwood floor, a single chair in the center. A timer in the corner indicated the stream would begin in 5 minutes. While waiting, I examined the data panel. It displayed numerous metrics. Current viewer count, 17. Average heart rate of viewers, 72 beats per minute. Average pupillary response, estimated engagement levels, and something labeled empathic resonance score. The sophistication of the analytics suggested serious technology behind what appeared visually to be a simple streaming setup. At precisely 2 a.m., a person entered the frame and sat in the chair. They were ordinary looking, dressed in casual clothes, their face visible but unremarkable. They seemed unaware of the camera, occasionally checking their phone or adjusting their position in the chair. Nothing dramatic or unusual happened. They simply sat, waited, occasionally showing signs of mild impatience or boredom. 10 minutes into this uneventful stream, I noticed changes in the metrics panel. Viewer heart rates had increased slightly. The empathic resonance score was rising. Most notably, my own heart was beating faster despite the mundane scene. A new metric appeared. Anticipation factor, 78%. I couldn't understand why watching someone simply sitting would generate anticipation, yet I felt it too, a growing tension without clear cause. After 20 minutes, the person in the chair checked their watch, stood up, and walked out of frame. The room remained empty for approximately 30 seconds. Then a different person entered and sat down. This new individual also seemed unaware of being recorded, also checked their phone periodically, also displayed mild impatience. The same scenario repeated with no significant variation. What changed dramatically were the metrics. Viewer heart rates increased further. Pupillary response showed significant dilation. The empathic resonance score dropped while anticipation factor rose to 91%. My own physiological response matched these trends. I felt tense, expectant, though nothing objectively tension-inducing was occurring. I recognized this as a conditioned response. Something about this particular setup, an ordinary person waiting alone in a room, had trained regular viewers to anticipate something significant. After 15 minutes, the second person left just as the first had done. The room remained empty again, briefly, before a third individual entered. As this pattern continued, I began to see subtle differences in how each person behaved in the apparently identical situation. Some seemed relaxed, others visibly anxious. Some checked the time frequently, others seemed content to wait. The observer's metrics fluctuated with each new subject, suggesting viewers were making judgments, forming preferences, developing expectations. The clinical nature of the observation disturbed me more than any explicit content would have. The sophisticated measurement of viewer responses, the controlled environment, the rotation of unwitting subjects. This wasn't amateur voyeurism, but something methodical, researched, purposeful. I was witnessing what appeared to be a psychological experiment with non-consenting participants on both sides. The observed subjects unaware of the viewers, and possibly the viewers themselves unaware of being studied through their physiological responses. After an hour, I closed the stream and immediately sent a message to Analyst Prime expressing ethical concerns about the consent issues involved. Their response came quickly, thanking me for my participation and noting that my observer metrics showed particularly interesting patterns for a first-time viewer. They explained that my heart rate, pupillary response, and attention patterns had been measured through my device's camera, a camera I had never authorized to be activated. I immediately covered my webcam with tape and ran security scans on my system. Finding nothing obvious, I still felt profoundly violated. Analyst Prime sent another message, assuring me that my data would be used anonymously and offering to share the resulting analysis for my own research. They seemed genuinely unable to understand why I might object to being monitored without consent, even while studying others being monitored without consent. The cognitive dissonance was remarkable. I didn't respond to their message. Instead, I uninstalled the specialized browser, documented my experience in an encrypted file, and tried to process what I had witnessed. The next morning, I received an email to my university account, an account I had never shared with Analyst Prime. The subject line read, "Observer Study Follow-up." The message contained a link to what was described as your observer profile based on last night's session. Against better judgment, I clicked the link using a virtual machine on a secure connection. The page displayed a detailed analysis of my viewing patterns during the previous night's stream, which subjects held my attention longest. microsecond measurements of my reactions to specific movements or expressions, comparison of my response patterns to other first-time viewers. Most disturbing was a section labeled Observer Typology Classification that categorized me as a pattern recognition dominant viewer with above average empathic suppression and researcher consistent cognitive framework. The accuracy of this analysis from just 1 hour of unknown surveillance was deeply unsettling. More troubling was the final section of the report, which predicted with specific probability percentages how likely I would be to discuss the experience with colleagues, 17%, report it to authorities, 12%, return for additional observation sessions, 64%, or attempt to investigate further independently, 89%. The last prediction proved immediately accurate. I began researching experience rooms through legitimate academic databases and cybersecurity resources. Most scholarly references dismissed them as urban legends or scams. Law enforcement bulletins mentioned them only as potential fraud schemes rather than actual surveillance operations. The few credible mentions described them as elaborate role-playing scenarios rather than non-consensual observation. A week later, I received another email, this time containing only a date, time, and link. No message, no explanation, just another observation session invitation. I ignored it. 3 days after that, another invitation arrived. Then another. The frequency increased to daily, then twice daily. Each invitation came from a different email address, making blocking ineffective. 2 weeks into this escalating pattern, I received something different, a link labeled Subject Perspective. When I accessed it through a secure system, it showed a video feed from my own office, recorded the previous day. The camera angle suggested it came from my computer's webcam, which remained covered with opaque tape. Somehow, they were still watching. I replaced my computer entirely, changed my phone, installed advanced security systems in my home, swept for hidden cameras and microphones, found nothing. Yet the invitations continued, now arriving through text messages, professional networking platforms, even comments on my academic articles, always with a date, time, and link, never with further explanation. After a month of this, I received a different type of message, an observation report similar to my own, but focused on a colleague in my department. It analyzed their viewing patterns, psychological responses, and behavioral predictions in the same clinical format as mine. The message implied that my colleague had been invited to an observation session because of their association with me. The final line read, "Observer networks expand through proximity patterns. Your data suggested 6 high compatibility potential observers in your immediate circle." I confronted my colleague cautiously, asking if they had received any unusual invitations recently. Their confused response confirmed they had no knowledge of what I was describing. I chose not to elaborate, not wanting to draw them further into whatever this was. But the implication was clear. My involvement had somehow marked those around me as potential participants. Yesterday, I received the most disturbing communication yet. Not an invitation or a report, but a video file. It showed a compilation of moments from my daily life over the previous week. Me teaching class, buying groceries, meeting with students, working in my office. Each clip was brief, captured from different angles and distances. Some appeared to come from security cameras or colleagues' devices. Others had no plausible source I could identify. The compilation ended with footage of me sleeping in my bedroom the previous night, shot from an angle that suggested a camera in the smoke detector. The file's metadata included viewing statistics. 27 observers had watched this compilation of my life. Their average heart rate, pupillary response, engagement levels, and empathic resonance scores were listed in precise detail. My existence had become content for the very system I had tried to study. This morning, I discovered a new application on my phone that I never installed. Simply labeled Observer, its icon is a minimalist eye design. I can't delete it. When opened, it shows only a counter currently reading 31 and a timer counting down from 24 hours. I don't know what happens when it reaches 0. I've turned off the phone, but found the same application appearing on my new laptop minutes later. I'm writing this account now as documentation and warning. I don't know who or what Analyst Prime represents. I don't know the purpose of these observation networks or why they focus so intently on expanding through my social connections. What I do know is that the line between observer and observed has completely collapsed in my life. Every moment now exists as potential content, every reaction as data for analysis. The most terrifying realization isn't that I'm being watched, is that I've begun watching myself through their framework, analyzing my own reactions, considering how they might appear to observers, modifying my behavior to affect the metrics I imagine are being recorded. My internal experience has been colonized by the observation paradigm. I've internalized the clinical gaze that was directed at me. The counter on the Observer app now reads 28. Whatever happens when it reaches 0, I doubt it represents the end of this experience. More likely, it marks a transition to a new phase, perhaps from passive subject to active participant in ways I can't yet imagine. The only certainty is that in a system designed to categorize everyone as either observer or observed, eventually everyone becomes both simultaneously. The feedback loop never ends. It only expands to include more unwitting participants, more data points, more patterns to analyze. The screen's blue light casts an artificial glow across my face as I hunch over my laptop in the darkness of my London flat. 3 a.m, and only the hum of my computer fan and occasional passing car break the silence. My fingers navigate through layers of encryption with practiced precision. The Tor browser bounces my signal across worldwide servers, wrapping me in digital anonymity. A notification pings from another tab, my banking app. Insufficient funds for an automatic payment. Again. 6 months ago, I was a mid-level IT specialist at Global Tech Marketing in Manchester. My days consisted of troubleshooting printer issues and resetting forgotten passwords for marketing executives who viewed tech support as digital janitors. Then came the redundancies, economic downturn, budget cuts, restructuring, corporate buzzwords that translated to one reality: I was expendable. The first month of unemployment wasn't unbearable. I had savings, not substantial, but enough to maintain a semblance of normalcy while I hunted for new opportunities. But as weeks stretched into months and rejection emails multiplied, my bank account dwindled alongside my sense of security. My modest flat in Dunstable transformed from sanctuary to overpriced cage, with rent consuming what little remained of my financial cushion. Last week, a pipe burst in my bathroom. The landlord took 3 days to send someone. The plumber left muddy footprints across my carpet and a bill for £180, an emergency call-out fee, not covered by the property management. That was the final straw that broke my financial back, pushing my account into overdraft territory I couldn't escape. The online forum started as mere distraction from mounting bills. Forums where anonymous users shared stories of systemic collapse, of corporate betrayal, of individuals forced to create their own safety nets when traditional ones failed them. Initially, I viewed them with skeptical detachment, digital venting spaces for the disaffected, but their voices began to resonate, talking of systems designed to fail people like me, of self-reliance in a world of broken promises, of protection against worst-case scenarios that loomed ever closer. I discovered the forum thread after my 4th job rejection in a single day. When the system fails you, create your own security. Hundreds of comments from people sharing similar stories of economic freefall. Their solutions range from cryptocurrency investments to underground bartering systems to, more disturbingly, methods of personal protection outside legal frameworks. One comment caught my attention, linking to additional resources for serious researchers only. I clicked, expecting another forum. Instead, I found detailed instructions for accessing certain marketplaces on the dark web. The comment promised nothing, suggested nothing, but the implication was clear. When conventional options fail, unconventional ones await. For 2 weeks, I merely observed. Learned. I told myself it was academic curiosity, nothing more. Just another IT professional exploring the architecture of internet underspaces. I convinced myself I was maintaining professional knowledge, not preparing, not considering, just learning, until tonight. The dark web marketplace glows on my screen, its rudimentary interface masking sophisticated security. I'd researched for weeks before attempting access, learning about cryptocurrency transactions, PGP encryption, and unwritten rules of these shadowy corners of the internet. My cursor moves methodically through categories: drugs, counterfeit documents, hacked accounts, stolen data. I navigate past them directly to hardware, a thin euphemism for weapons. Something flickers at my window, a reflection or shadow movement. I freeze, heart suddenly racing. After 30 seconds of paralyzed vigilance, I identify the source. Just the neighbor's security light, triggering from a passing cat. The momentary panic embarrasses me, but also reinforces my purpose. This growing fear, this constant vigilance, this is precisely why I'm here. I've never owned a gun, never fired one outside a controlled range during a stag do years ago. British firearms laws had always been a distant concept, irrelevant to my daily existence, but desperation rewrites principles with remarkable efficiency. Just insurance, I tell myself. Just control in an uncontrollable life. I select a Glock 19 from a highly rated vendor, gently used. Serial number removed. The Bitcoin price equals nearly £3,000. 2 months of my remaining savings, but safety transcends price tags. The vendor's profile shows hundreds of satisfied customers, with comments alluding to smooth transactions and quality merchandise. Their response time averages under 3 hours. Their rating, perfect 5 stars across 127 transactions. Too perfect. I hesitate, cursor hovering over the contact vendor button. In legitimate marketplaces, perfect ratings trigger suspicion. Inevitable dissatisfied customers, occasional misunderstandings, shipping damages. Perfection suggests manipulation. But here I am, considering an illegal purchase from an anonymous vendor with suspiciously perfect feedback. Desperation truly is the enemy of critical thinking. A sudden power fluctuation causes my lights to dim momentarily. Another sign? A warning from the universe? Or just the aging electrical infrastructure of my building succumbing to overnight power demands? The moment passes, but leaves residual unease like static electricity on skin. I complete the encrypted form and arrange the dead drop delivery through the complex system the vendor outlines. Transaction finished. I close my laptop. A strange chill spreads through my chest, replacing the momentary surge of purpose. I've stepped beyond a boundary I never thought I'd cross. The vendor's instructions are to wait for confirmation, anywhere from hours to days. Sleep becomes a luxury. I check my encrypted email constantly, twitching at every notification. My mind conjures worst-case scenarios: police at my door, bank accounts frozen, imprisonment. The irony doesn't escape me. Seeking security has made me more paranoid than ever. At work the following day, a temporary data entry position paying barely above minimum wage, I nearly jump out of my skin when the office security guard greets me in the lobby. His casual morning sounds accusatory to my guilty conscience. I mumble a response and hurry to my windowless cubicle, where I spend the day mechanically inputting figures while compulsively checking my phone under the desk. When confirmation finally arrives 3 days later, its brevity chills me. 2 days later, detailed instructions appear. The exchange location: an abandoned industrial area outside Dunstable. Coordinates: time, 2 a.m. tomorrow. And warnings that deviating from protocol means cancellation without refund. Cash only, come alone. Follow specific routes to avoid CCTV cameras. Something about the precise nature of these arrangements triggers my first real unease. The vendor specified a meeting point that maximizes isolation. Strange for someone merely selling merchandise. A stray thought surfaces. What if the product isn't what's being valued in this transaction? I dismiss the paranoia, just nerves from crossing into illegality. That evening, I withdraw cash from scattered ATMs across town, never taking enough from any single machine to trigger reporting requirements. After the third withdrawal, my card declines. Insufficient funds. I'd miscalculated. The recent overdraft fees had reduced my available balance. Panic rises as I mentally recalculate. I'm £320 short. I return to my flat and desperately search for valuables. My watch, a gift from my father, might fetch enough at a pawn shop. I have exactly 90 minutes before shops close. The race against time leaves me sweating as I rush across town, only to receive an offer of only £280. Desperate haggling increases it to £300, still short. I empty my wallet of emergency cash, count out coins from the jar in my kitchen, and scrape together the final amount by selling my rarely used tablet to a cash converter shop just before closing. The clerk eyes me suspiciously as I anxiously check the time. His deliberate slowness in processing the transaction feels pointed, accusatory. Back at my flat, I purchase a prepaid phone, black clothing, and gloves from unfamiliar shops. Each action minimizes my digital trail. Following advice from the forums that guided me here, the prepaid phone, a basic model requiring no identification, feels alien in my hand compared to my regular smartphone. Its primitive interface reminds me of devices from a decade ago. Functional but stripped down, anonymous, disposable, like I'm becoming. As I lay out these items on my bed, doubt resurfaces. The arrangement feels overtly clandestine, even for an illegal weapons purchase. The vendor's rating was perfect, suspiciously so. 5 stars across dozens of transactions, without a single complaint or issue. In legitimate marketplaces, such perfection raises red flags about fake reviews. Why had I dismissed this in a space where deception carries far deadlier stakes? My phone buzzes. My landlord threatening eviction next week if rent remains unpaid. The hesitation dissolves. This is survival. This is reclaiming control. Even if the situation feels wrong. The alternative, homelessness, complete financial ruin, seems worse. I try to sleep before the night's activities, but achieve only fragmented consciousness, jerking awake from micro dreams where police sirens wail or shadowy figures surround my bed. Each time, I check the clock. 10:47 p.m., 11:23 p.m., 12:05 a.m. The minutes crawl with excruciating slowness until it's time to prepare. The night of the exchange arrives with a sudden drop in temperature, unseasonably cold for September. I dress in black, hide the cash in my jacket's inner pocket, and slip the prepaid phone into my jeans. I leave my regular phone behind and take precautions the forums recommended, exiting through the rear door, following a winding path to a distant bus stop, paying fare with cash. On the night bus, only 3 other passengers ride. An elderly man who appears homeless, clutching a plastic bag of possessions. A young woman with headphones staring blankly out the window. And a middle-aged man in work clothes, likely finishing a late shift. Do any of them notice me? Do any of them care about my destination or purpose? The young woman briefly makes eye contact, then returns to her window vigil. The momentary connection sends a jolt of paranoia through me. Does she know? Could she possibly suspect? Dunstable's nighttime transformation renders familiar landmarks alien and threatening. The bus carries me to the industrial district's edge, where abandoned factories loom like fossilized behemoths against the moonlit sky. As I step off the bus, my footsteps echo against concrete with unsettling clarity in the stillness. The bus pulls away, its taillights diminishing into the distance, taking with them my last connection to civilization. I am truly alone now. Or am I? A fox darts across the road ahead, freezing momentarily in my sight line before vanishing into shadows. Its sudden appearance and disappearance leaves me unnerved, heart pounding against my ribs like it might break through. I check coordinates on the prepaid phone before venturing deeper into the derelict labyrinth. Without streetlights, I use the phone's flashlight in brief bursts that compromise my night vision and heighten my unease. Each shadow-cast building could conceal watchers. Each broken window might frame observing eyes. The isolation that earlier seemed like security protocol now feels like strategic vulnerability. A sudden noise, metal scraping against concrete, freezes me mid-step. I extinguish my light and press against a wall, listening intently. Seconds stretch into a full minute of silence. Just the wind-moving debris, or something else. When no further sound follows, I proceed, but with heightened vigilance that borders on paranoia. The designated meeting point appears. A loading dock behind a former furniture factory. Rust consumes the metal railings while weeds reclaim the concrete through stubborn cracks. I arrive at 1:47 a.m. Early, but caution outweighs courtesy in these circumstances. Positioning myself in shadows beside the loading dock, I secure clear sight lines to all approaches. The night air carries distant rain and industrial decay. A metallic taste coats my tongue. Fear made physical. I suppress the urge to check the time again, knowing the screen's glow could reveal my position. Minutes pass with excruciating slowness. Each sound, distant traffic, the creaking of abandoned structures settling, the scurrying of urban wildlife, triggers fresh adrenaline surges. My muscles ache from sustained tension, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. At 1:58, a notification chimes softly from my prepaid phone. The message redirects me to new coordinates, a location nearly half a mile east. My throat constricts as though invisible hands tightened around it. This wasn't in the protocol. The vendor had been explicit about adherence to original instructions, warning that deviation would result in transaction cancellation. A legitimate change would come through the same encrypted channel as our previous communications. I silence the phone and remain motionless. Either someone is attempting to redirect me, or the vendor has broken their own security practices. Neither option comforts. I consider abandoning the transaction entirely, writing off the lost Bitcoin as tuition in a harsh lesson about digital underworlds. Exactly 2 a.m., according to my watch. The vendor should appear within minutes. I scan the darkness, searching for movement, for the approaching silhouette of my contact. Nothing. The seconds tick by. 2 minutes passed. 5 minutes passed. The lengthening absence confirms my suspicion. Something has gone wrong. At precisely 2:03, movement catches my eye. A lone figure emerges between distant buildings, approaching with deliberate, measured steps. They move with unsettling confidence, not the cautious manner of someone conducting illegal business, but the assured stride of someone navigating familiar territory. Something in that walk, too controlled, too precise, sends a warning pulse through my nerves. The figure stops 20 feet from the loading dock, head tilting mechanically as they scan the area. Their face remains hidden beneath a hooded jacket, but their posture screams predator, not merchant. My instinct screams to run, but I remain frozen in shadow. The figure reaches into their pocket, withdrawing not a package, but a small device that emits a faint glow. They consult it, then turn deliberately toward my hiding spot with unnatural precision. The notification on my phone suddenly makes terrible sense. Not a competing buyer trying to divert me, but a hunter attempting to flush out prey. Perhaps even a tactic they've refined through repetition. Send unexpected instructions. Observe which hiding spots suddenly produce movement as nervous buyers check their phones. My suspicion solidifies when the figure speaks into what must be a communication device. Though too distant to hear the words, the gesture itself reveals everything. I'm not dealing with a lone seller, but an organized operation. I slide deeper into shadow, weighing impossible options. The loading dock offers no exit except past this figure. Behind me stands the facility's sealed entrance, secured with ancient chains and padlocks. The surrounding area provides no cover for a sprint to safety, only open ground where I'd be immediately spotted. A small rock dislodges from somewhere above me, clattering loudly against the loading dock's metal surface. I freeze, barely breathing, as the figure's head snaps toward the sound, toward me. Had I disturbed it unknowingly, or was this incredibly bad luck? The figure advances toward the loading dock with unnerving directness. No hesitation, no searching. They know exactly where I am. I turn to the chain doors, my only chance. The padlock is substantial, but the hasp securing it to the door has corroded over decades of neglect. I brace against the door frame and pull the chain with desperate strength. Metal groans but holds. The approaching footsteps quicken. I yank again, throwing my full weight backward. The hasp tears partially from rotted wood with a betraying screech. One final pull breaks it free. The chains slither through the handles as I slip inside, a beam of light slicing through the space I occupied seconds before. The abandoned factory's interior stretches before me, a cathedral of shadows. Moonlight filtering through broken windows reveals a vast production floor littered with debris, fallen ceiling tiles, shattered glass, remnants of human occupation. The air thickens with dust and decay, carrying the musty scent of forgotten places. My lungs protest with the urge to cough, but survival instinct suppresses the reflex. I navigate primarily by touch, putting distance between myself and the entrance. Behind me, chains rattle as my pursuer discovers my escape route. They'll follow within seconds. I need to find hiding space or another exit. My shoe connects with something solid, sending it skittering across the concrete with a betraying clatter. I freeze, listening. The entrance door creaks open. They're inside. The factory floor transitions to administrative areas, smaller rooms containing skeletal office furniture. I duck into a former manager's office with walls intact but no door. Not a hiding place, but a moment to regroup and plan. A beam of light sweeps the main floor as my pursuer enters. Their methodical movements suggest professional training or experience. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The beam pauses, then divides into 3 separate lights. Not one hunter, 3. Ice forms in my stomach. The entire transaction, the vendor profile, the gun listing, the positive reviews. All elaborate fiction designed to lure desperate people to isolated locations. But why? Robbery seems too mundane for this level of preparation. Something else drives these predators. I crouch behind a decaying desk as a light beam sweeps across the office doorway. It lingers suspiciously before continuing. They know I'm nearby. Time is evaporating. A spider descends from the ceiling directly in front of my face. I flinch involuntarily, nearly losing balance and knocking over a rusted metal bin. The near miss leaves me trembling. Even the smallest sound could now prove fatal. My eyes, adjusted to darkness, spot a ceiling access panel above. My only chance. I wait until the searching beams focus elsewhere before silently pushing the desk beneath the panel. The furniture protests with a groan, but the hunters don't immediately respond. I climb atop the desk and push against the panel. Years of undisturbed grime seal it, until it suddenly gives way. I pull myself into the crawl space just as light floods the office again. The space above the ceiling is claustrophobic and dust-filled. Each breath threatens to trigger a cough that would immediately reveal my position. I lie flat across ceiling joists, knowing the ancient tiles between them wouldn't support my weight. Below, slivers of light pierce through cracks as hunters conduct a thorough search. A persistent tickle builds in my throat, dust particles irritating sensitive tissue. I press my sleeve against my mouth, fighting the urge to cough with every fiber of my being. The pressure builds, eyes watering, chest constricting. I inch forward along the joists away from the office. The crawl space extends across several rooms until reaching the open expanse above the main factory floor. No continuing without dropping down, directly into the hunting ground. A crash echoes from the office where I entered the ceiling. They found my route. Worse, the impact destabilizes the already precarious structure. A tremor runs through the joist beneath me as dust rains downward. Stealth no longer matters, only speed. I identify a momentarily clear area below and push downward with all my strength. The ceiling disintegrates and I plummet through cascading debris. I land hard, pain shooting through my ankle. The crash creates momentary confusion as hunters converge on the collapsing ceiling. For the first time, they break silence. Sharp commands cutting through dust clouds. The voices hold no accent, just clinical efficiency in deploying resources to recapture their prey. My ankle throbs, possibly sprained, definitely damaged. Each step sends fresh waves of pain, but adrenaline pushes me forward. I limp toward a stairwell leading upward. Higher ground seems counterintuitive for escape, but they'll expect me to flee toward ground-level exits. The unpredictable path might buy precious seconds. The stairs protest beneath my weight as I ascend. Behind me, light beams become frantic in their search patterns. They've temporarily lost my trail, but won't remain confused long. Halfway up, a stair gives way beneath my foot. I pitch forward, barely catching myself on the railing. The rotted wood crumbles in my grasp. For a sickening moment, I'm suspended in space, certain I'll fall. Somehow, miraculously, my other hand finds purchase on a more solid section. I pull myself upward, heart thundering so loudly, I'm certain they must hear it echoing through the building. The second floor contains rows of empty shelving creating a maze-like structure. I navigate through them, seeking windows or roof access, while my injured ankle threatens collapse with each step. Blood pulses against my temples with such intensity, I fear they might hear it too. A sudden noise from the stairwell. Footsteps, multiple sets, ascending with deliberate caution. They found my trail again. Time evaporates like morning dew in summer heat. Moonlight spills through a broken window at the storage area's far end. Looking out reveals a partially collapsed roof section below the window. Then a 20-foot drop to the ground. Not ideal, but approaching footsteps on the stairs eliminate alternatives. I ease through the broken window onto the unstable roof section, which immediately protests under my weight. Below, discarded pallets and construction debris offer a marginally better landing than bare concrete. A flashlight beam sweeps across the storage area behind me as the roof section begins collapsing. I push off, directing my descent toward the debris pile. The impact drives air from my lungs and sends fresh pain through my ankle, but miraculously leaves me conscious and mobile. Splintered wood tears my palms as I stagger upright. I hear the roof section crash completely as I push away from the wall, forcing my damaged body into a stumbling run. The industrial complex forms a maze of derelict buildings, all potential hiding places, all potential traps. I have no plan beyond creating distance, hoping that my pursuer's determination has limits. A distant engine sounds, a vehicle approaching. Relief floods me momentarily. Civilization, witnesses, safety. But the engine cuts abruptly, followed by car doors closing with muffled precision. Not random passers-by, reinforcements. A metallic click stops me, the unmistakable sound of a round being chambered. A silhouette detaches from the shadow of a dumpster ahead. My stomach drops through ice. How had they gotten before me? I pivot only to see a second figure emerging between buildings to my left. They've herded me, using my panic against me, driving me along a predictable path while closing their net. My remaining option is a narrow alley between two warehouses. I lunge toward it despite my screaming ankle. The alley is dark and obstacle-strewn, but navigable. Behind me, I hear my pursuers control pace, unhurried. They know the alley is a dead end. Halfway down the passage, my foot catches on something, a discarded pipe or bar. I stumble, catching myself against the rough brick wall. Skin tears from my palms, adding fresh pain to my inventory of injuries. I push onward, desperation mounting with each step. After 30 yards, a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire halts my escape. Too high to climb, especially injured. I turn, back against the fence, facing my approaching hunters. Their flashlights switch off, but ambient light from distant street lamps reveals their steady advance. The lead figure stops 10 feet away, close enough to see his face beneath the hood. Young, ordinary looking, except for eyes empty of empathy or emotion. Clinical eyes that observe suffering with scientific detachment. He raises something that reflects dully in the dim light. A smartphone. On its screen, my photograph, taken from social media I'd deleted months ago. Beside it, information I'd believed private. My Dunstable address, employment history, bank account activity showing my deepening financial crisis, the precise amount of my overdraft, the exact figure in my savings account before redundancy, the monthly utility cost for my flat. The gun was never real. It was bait, selected based on digital breadcrumbs revealing my desperation. Everything, from forum posts, resonating with my fears to the vendor's high rating, was crafted to lead me here, to this alley, to this moment. Understanding freezes my blood more effectively than fear. I wasn't randomly selected. I was profiled, studied, and targeted with the precision of commercial algorithms that determine which advertisements we see online. Except this campaign's conversion goal wasn't purchase, but capture. The young man pockets the phone and withdraws a real gun from his jacket. Behind him, the second hunter raises what I now recognize as a camera, its recording light blinking steadily. The third blocks any slim hope of escape. The details of my financial life appear on a device screen. My monthly internet costs, my VPN subscription fee, the precise amounts withdrawn from cash machines across Dunstable over the past week. They've catalogued my desperation in sterile spreadsheet format, treating my gradual economic collapse as clinical data points. They hadn't just tracked my digital movements. They'd invaded every aspect of my digital life. The leader aims at my chest with mechanical precision. The camera adjusts position slightly, framing the scene with professional detachment. This isn't just execution, it's production. Another device appears displaying video footage. A man trapped exactly as I am now, backed against a fence. Comprehension dawning across his features. The timestamp shows last month's date. The footage ends with a muzzle flash. I straighten against the fence. In my final clarity, I understand my fatal error. I hadn't sought a weapon. I'd unknowingly auditioned for a role. Every digital breadcrumb I dropped had marked me not as consumer, but as commodity. Not customer, but content. My desperation wasn't vulnerability to be exploited. It was the precise quality they'd been hunting. A distant siren wails, police or ambulance, impossible to determine. For a fleeting moment, hope flickers, but the hunters don't even glance toward the sound. They know response times to this abandoned district. They've calculated their window precisely. The gun barrel aligns with my chest. I close my eyes, refusing to give them the satisfaction of capturing my fear. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I hear the soft exhalation of the leader's breath as his finger tightens on the trigger. The gunshot echoes through the Dunstable industrial wasteland, transforming from a single report into a cacophony that seems endless. The bullet tears through me, and as consciousness fades, my final thought is of my laptop, still glowing in my empty flat, the digital gravestone I carved with my own desperate keystrokes. The hunters pack their equipment with practiced efficiency. They've captured what they came for, another episode in their macabre series. The footage will be edited, enhanced, distributed to subscribers who pay premium rates for authentic content. My death will be categorized, tagged, and monetized. British male, 34, IT professional, financial distress, Dunstable location. In the digital marketplace where I thought I was the customer, I was always the product. My body grows cold in the alley, while somewhere in the darkest corners of the internet, a vendor account updates its perfect rating statistics, maintaining immaculate credibility to lure the next desperate soul seeking security in an insecure world. My story becomes data, content, entertainment, another digital artifact in an endless archive of human vulnerability exploited for profit and pleasure. The cycle continues, invisible to those who haven't yet reached the level of desperation, where safeguards and skepticism crumble before basic survival needs. The hunters disappear into the night, leaving nothing but cooling blood and a cautionary tale that will never be told. By morning, my body will be gone, erased as thoroughly as my digital footprint will be sanitized. No connection between the unemployed IT specialist and the content newly available in exclusive subscription-only forums. The marketplace listing remains active. The Glock 19 still displays as available, its perfect reviews enticing the next desperate soul who believes they're purchasing security rather than auditioning for annihilation. The digital hunt continues, endless and invisible, harvesting those who have fallen through society's cracks into a shadow economy where they are no longer consumers, just consumables. 2 days later, an email arrives in my former manager's inbox. A job application for a position similar to mine from someone whose employment history, financial situation, and recent online behaviors fit a familiar profile. The cycle begins anew. Another target identified, another hunt initiated. In the darkest corners of the internet, where desperation meets opportunity, the predators continue to feed, invisible to all but their carefully selected prey.